Hi, it's August 19th, 2002. This is David Denison, and we're in the cottage at White Lake, and I'm sitting with my father, John Denison and Teasley Denison. And I'd like to ask some questions about their personal history. And number one, I'd like both of you just to talk about where we are and a little bit of history of this cottage and White Lake. And either one of you can start first.
Well, in White Lake, Michigan, but if you're going to start with this cottage, it was built in about 1973.
Oh, this one, that's
73. And it was built after splitting the property, which I inherited from my father, who inherited it from his grandfather, who bought it from, I don't remember exactly who they bought it from, but he bought it through the Butterfield Law Firm. And the property was split. We took 240 feet on the east and gave 100-foot lakefront to the Keenans. On the west, straight back, and it goes from the lake 660 feet back. So we built on ours. We had some thoughts of, and gave them to an architect named, Teasley, what was it?
I can't remember his name.
DeYoung, who was a young architect here in Grand Rapids and later came to Muskegon, and he's now pretty well known, but that time was not, and he designed the house. The builder of the house was a Carl Bogema, who had built some houses up here, and just about the time we decided to build, we got called by American Hospital Supply to go to Japan. So we were really not here during the building of it, at least not during the finishings portion of it.
And we were very fortunate with the architect because he was very imaginative and also innovated in building this house. In fact, everybody that passed it while it was being built stopped because they hadn't seen such a contemporary house then.
And before he put the siding on, it looked like kind of a chicken coop. The only changes we made from the architect were one that Teasley suggested, and that was that the lake side of the house, which had sliding doors, include fixed windows above it, which opened up the whole ceiling, and that the porch not be enclosed, as the architect had suggested. So that was really the only changes we made to it.
It's made out of redwood, which at the time also was unusual, and it blends in delightfully with the rest of the trees.
Great. It's a beautiful summer day. We had a lightning storm last night, and it's wonderful, typical White Lake weather. I'd like to start, as far as the personal history concerned, just asking each of you where you were born and some memories of your early childhood. And I'll start with Mother first.
Well, I was born in 1922 in Denver, Colorado. I was the only child of my parents, and I lived there until I was 5. From there, we went to South Orange, New Jersey. My father was with the telephone company and worked in New York, I guess, and commuted to New Jersey. And we were there 1 year. And as far as my early childhood in Denver, I remember very little.
How about you, Dad?
I was born in Grand Rapids on Lion Street in a house that I really have never seen. At about 1.5, my father was transferred. I don't really know what he did in Grand Rapids, but was transferred to Chicago to work for the Illinois company, which later became for the Continental Illinois Bank. And I moved to a house in Evanston, and I was about a year and a half old at that time, on 1030 Grove Street, which was a row of houses, an end house, a row of 5 houses. They're not there anymore. It's a retirement home now.
Were you that young, really?
Year and a half, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was a year and a half when we moved there, and they did move directly to Evanston. And we lived there, I don't know how many years, but till probably about 1939 or 40, and then moved to 1621 Wesley Avenue in a house.
Mother, tell me about your parents, a little more background of where they came from, what type of people they were.
My father was also born in Denver. My mother was from Atlanta, Georgia, and my father tells a story that in the First World War he was stationed in Atlanta, Georgia.
What were their full names?
Our mother was Agnes Coggins Webb, and Dad was Henry Wesley Webb. But Dad was stationed in Denver during the First World War and met Mother and took her all the way out to Denver, Colorado from Atlanta, Georgia, which was quite an undertaking.
What were they like as people? What were their personalities like?
Well, they were wonderful parents. I guess being an only child, I certainly was spoiled, but I had lots of fun with them, and they were very caring. They also were good disciplinarians, and I had a good growing up life with Aggie and Wes Webb.
Your father was a disciplinarian. Was he a tough man?
Oh, not very. It's just that, especially when I started dating, I had to be home at a certain time, and if I wasn't, he was out in front waiting for me, and the poor boys, whoever they were, fled hurriedly.
What was some of the silly characteristics
Of my parents?
of your parents? Because you have a silly side, I think.
I can't think of either being silly.
No.
I
Pretty
can't
serious
remember
folks.
what it be.
Tell me a little bit about your parents, Dad.
Well, my father was born in Grand Rapids, and he graduated from the University of Michigan. He was a lieutenant in World War I, and he apparently had an engineering degree of some kind because he did go overseas, and one of the things that he was instrumental in developing was the first bulletproof gas tank in the planes, because they were having trouble. The gas tank was between the 2 seats in the plane, and so the Germans knew this and were beginning to put incendiary bullets into the gas tank and blowing the things up, so they did nothing but rub wire rubber around it to seal it. I don't know anything about that, but I don't know how he met my mother. My mother was from Kansas City, Missouri, one of 3 daughters whose mother raised them from pretty much childhood because their father died.
And again, their full names?
My father's name was John Walter Denison. I don't know where the Walter comes from. And my mother's name was Teresa Tarleton Chappell. And the Chappell, of course, was her father's name, and the Tarleton was a family last name. And they moved to Illinois. It's really the first time I have any recollection. My father was a banker in Chicago. He worked with municipal bonds. He was head of the municipal bond department of the Continental Bank. Never was really very much intrigued with his job, particularly. It wasn't an all-encompassing thing, but...
Was he successful?
I think he was successful. Became a vice president, or maybe a second vice president, but banks have lots of vice presidents, and I don't think he was ever completely enchanted with the job he had or tremendously motivated.
Would you say he was a family man?
Yeah, I think he'd been brought up in a family that was somewhat close, in that his maternal grandmother had died when he was maybe 13 or 14 years old, and his father then remarried fairly shortly after that. So I think he was. I never felt that we were a particularly close family, and I don't really remember a whole lot of discipline or factions or necessarily any crises or anything else that developed either between my sister or my mother or father. My father, my mother, I remembered liked parties, liked people, and so did my father. So they liked to go to the country club, and they liked to do things like that, as Teasley's mother and father did, and they knew each other.
So would you say both of your parents were in love with each other and liked each other throughout their lives?
Certainly mine did.
Yeah, I think so, and I never was ever aware of any wandering or straying or anything else. I don't, possible, but I never had any.
And their personalities, Dad, what would you say their personalities were like?
Well, I think both of them were fairly even-tempered. I don't remember any temper tantrums. I never remember any major disagreements between the two of them or anything like that. I mean, lots of times people get mad and sound off and slam doors. I don't remember any single incident of that ever happening. My father liked to tinker a lot. He liked to do odd jobs, and at the cottage over here, when he retired, he did lots of it, including changing the entire foundation of it himself, jacking up the house and so forth. He used to like to do that kind of thing.
Would you say you came from a middle class or upper middle class?
Well, I think everybody considers their middle class. I don't know anybody who says, yeah, I'm lower class or I'm upper class. Maybe some of them, but most people say, yes, they were in the middle class and ordinary Americans and so forth.
Did either one of you feel like your family suffered economically?
No, in fact, when the Depression came along, I never was aware of any deprivations. At that time, I started at this girls' school during the Depression, and it didn't seem to strap anyone. And I don't know. I never noticed.
I don't have any memories of Depression at all. Everything I ever did was historical and not even within the family. I don't remember any stories of anybody having really difficult times.
During your childhood, tell me about your friends and activities, Mother, that you enjoy or didn't enjoy.
Well, as I said, I went to grade school in Evanston, and then I started at Roycemore School of Girls at 8th grade. And the interesting thing is that there are 12 of us who, now I think it's down to 12, who have met every summer in Wisconsin at one of the girls' summer places. And this year it will be the 61st, I believe. Same girls from 8th grade.
How long were you both all in the same school?
From 8th grade through high school.
Through high school. And right now, how many of those original members are still getting together?
About 8 or 12, 8 to 10.
Well, there are about 7 or 8 of them at Wasaki.
Yeah.
And probably when we were down in Virginia, there are probably 12 of them.
Oh, yes, at least.
What were some of your activities, your
In
things
high
that
school?
you enjoyed in childhood, that you excelled at, whether it be sports
Well,
or
I was
extracurricular?
a right end in field hockey. And if you know anything about field hockey, the ends were the ones that carried the ball down the field and then passed it over to the center, and she got to make the goals.
So you had to be quick?
I had to be fast, yes.
Fast.
And also I played basketball, and being one of the taller ones, I was captain of the basketball team in high school for a while. And what else? Boys.
Did you act at all? At that age?
Yes, we had a very active dramatic department at Royce-Moore, and with a marvelous teacher, and we all thought we were budding actresses.
What was your favorite roles when you were acting?
Oh, heavens, I don't know. Usually I played men because I was tall, and the little ones got to play the glamorous women. But we had fun, it was great.
Dad, tell me about your childhood friends and activities that you enjoyed.
Well, they would have to be from Evanston, and at the end row of the house, 5 houses down, was somebody my age named Keith Stevenson, who I probably knew when I was 7 or 8 years old, I don't know when. And I still keep up with him, and he's in California. So he and I went around together a lot. There was also a friend of his, John Pullen, that we went with somewhat. But Keith and I would get into trouble from time to time, and one problem that we got into was that, and I guess I led it, you were collecting miniature cars, and the dime store was up in town, and Keith and I went in, and I showed him how you could take something off the counter, and you could put it into your pocket, and you could walk out without paying for it. But somebody stopped us before we got out and put the two of us in a wooden cage down in the basement.
Yeah.
And kept us there for an hour or two, or it seemed like an hour or two, and they said they were going to call our parents and this and that. So we were obviously scared to death. And about after an hour or so of this, they let us go, warning that they had parents, and we went home. And I remember playing in the backyard, both of us playing, but not saying anything to each other, and scared to death. Nothing ever really came of it. I don't know whether the parents ever knew it or not.
Oh, I thought they called the parents.
No, I don't ever remember the parents ever saying anything about it. And I suspect they just didn't. They knew we were scared to death. But from then on, you quickly learned that you didn't take anything, anytime, any place. And that was one thing.
What activity?
Another interesting one was a guy that we knew in age, probably about age 11 and 12, named Pat Tanner. And it was the first time we'd ever kind of bumped up against somebody that was kind of effeminate. Well, we didn't really know much about gays, but he was obviously a little bit effeminate. And we ran around with him and a Gordon Muckow at the time for 2-3 years, and I went away to school, and Pat Tanner then became a writer's name of Patrick Dennis, and he wrote Annie Mayne. And he is now a biography of his own, and he went on to live a really interesting life, but I never saw him again.
What activities did you excel at and that you enjoyed when you were a kid?
Nothing that I remember.
No
I never was an athlete at sports, but of course you always had to play something in the things, and I played soccer to an extent, but because I was a fullback, because that was generally where they put the person who wasn't particularly
How old were you
talented.
when you played soccer?
Oh, I played soccer all the way up through, I think even into college. I played.
Really?
I think so. I know in prep school I did. I mean, you had to go out for a fall sport.
Right.
And so I would go out for soccer.
So would you say you were particularly athletic or not?
No, I would not say that I was. I don't think I was particularly coordinated.
How about clubs in school? Debate or anything like that? Were you
Nothing, really none. I've never been club-oriented or country club-oriented or any of those things very much.
Oh.
You belong to the yacht club and the golf club, but you belong to it mainly because you play golf, not for the dances and that kind of thing.
Well, when was the first time you went sailing?
Oh, I was probably taken sailing at age 1 or 2,
Right.
probably.
Did you excel personally in sailing?
I didn't necessarily excel, but I was certainly competitive with, up at White Lake where we were sailing nippers and any kind of a boat you could put
Did they
together.
have nippers back then?
Well, it wasn't a nipper, but I remember my grandmother making a sail that we made. We cut the tree for the mast, and she made the sail. It was on a rowboat, and that's the first boat I can ever remember. It really wasn't much of a sailboat, but it was the rudiments of doing it.
What was the first sailing you did competitively? In what kind of boat?
Well, it'd probably be sea scows, and I had, although I crewed for a lot of people up at White Lake, the first boat I owned was a sea scow, which was named Dividend, and it was the number was W11 because picked that because it showed through on both sides of the sail as the same number. And I know run a trophies. Yeah, I might get a second or third, or but I didn't certainly never got a season trophy out of it.
Mother, who was your favorite friend, your best friend when you were young, and what was she like?
That's very hard to say because I have so many good friends. I can't say I don't believe I ever had a best friend.
Besides the acting, were you a writer
In high school?
in high school, or poet, or?
The reason I keep referring back to high school is because I only had 2 years of college and didn't particularly excel at anything at college. I was taking lots of chemistry because I thought I wanted to be a nurse, but I never got very far with that. But I was in the Glee Club in high school. I loved that. I was in the Red Feather Club, which was a hiking club. We were active girls.
When did you learn to play the ukulele?
Oh, heavens, that
Later?
was before.
Before?
Before.
Oh.
Mother taught me when I was just a little
Oh,
girl.
really?
If I can interrupt, because I made some notes here, and you want a timeline of some kind in here. I made some notes to give you where I went to school all the way through, and it's all right. I'll run through that to give you a timeline. I went to public school in Evanston, Larimer School, from grades kindergarten to grade 6. The Larimer School is no longer there, burned down. It's now a park in Evanston. And then for grades 7 and 8, went to, what was it, Teasley Nichols School?
I don't know. I didn't know you then, kiddo.
Okay, the South Evanston was the school, 7th and 8th grades to Nichols School in South Evanston. Then I went to Evanston High School for 2 years, for freshman and sophomore year. And probably because I wasn't doing very well or something or other, anyway, they decided they were going to send me away to prep school. So for the 11th grade, which would be a junior year, I went to Western Reserve Academy in Hudson, Ohio. And that probably would have been about 1937. But I only stayed, I believe, for 1 year.
Whose
for
decision
part of
was
it.
that
To
go
go?
out to Western Reserve?
Families entirely. I never heard of Western Reserve, and I had no.
Was there something that triggered that decision to send you out there?
If there was, I don't know what it was. I just think they
'Cause
decided.
that was a big move.
It was a big move, but it wasn't, I don't remember it as being a dramatic thing or anything else.
Okay.
But I think I was there a year and a half, but the timeline doesn't quite, but anyway, in December of let's say the second year at Western Reserve, I got diagnosed as having tuberculosis. So they took me out of school and put me to bed. That's what you did. You stayed in bed for tuberculosis. And that summer, I spent, I guess that spring, I went to Arizona on my own to a place called Carr Canyon Ranch, which is up from Hereford, Arizona, up in the mountains. And it was a working ranch, but it was also a dude ranch, and I was there and alone doing it. Did some trapping and that kind of a thing. Then I came back, someplace in there I spent some time in White Lake again in bed. Then in the fall of 1939, I went to Asheville School. I was coming back to finish my final year. So I had lost most of a year in there. So when I graduated from Asheville School, having only been there 1 year in 1940, and went to start in Princeton in 1940, in the fall of 1940. So in 1941, and when I, among other things, got into the Field Artillery ROTC when I went in as a freshman. In 1941, was, of course, Pearl Harbor, so everything kind of fell apart. But I was in the ROTC, so the idea was I was continuing the ROTC. They permitted us to go to summer school for 2 years at Princeton, and that would make up for 1 full year, so you could graduate. So actually I graduated from Princeton it took the 4 years, but did it in 3 years. And so I was in summer school the years of 41 and 42. And in January or February of 43, they actually put us in uniform. We lived in campus, and we graduated in June from Princeton, and they sent all of us in the ROTC group to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, to get our lieutenancies.
When you think the fact that you were sent or you went away from your parents in high school, away to school, do you think that's a good thing? Would you suggest that a child be given that option, or a parent should consider having a child?
Depends on the
Do you
situation.
think that helped in your development or helped you become more independent, say?
You asking me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I in my case, you make the break from the family. Someplace along the line, you make the break from the family. In my case, it was made at that time. From then on, I had to kind of make it on your own. You have to. Nobody's leading you around or making friends or settling your questions for you. So, yeah, someplace you have to make it. And as far as I'm concerned, you can make it any time in the high school year, but you better make it by the time you go to college, or you're going to get awful dependent on your family, I think.
In your school history, Dad did a great job with the timeline. Mother, when your schooling, were you ever sent to a school away from your parents in high school or prior to college?
Not to a school. I also went to a ranch in Arizona, and it was the same ranch that my aunt had been to and my mother, and the people that ran it were still running it, and I went by myself.
This is the summer?
Yes. And had.
How old were you?
Well, I was a junior year in high school, I think.
And what memories do you have of that experience?
Oh, very few.
Very few.
I remember mostly in my childhood visiting my 2 grandmothers, one in Canton, Georgia, outside of Atlanta, and the other in Denver, Colorado, and I would sort of alternate between the two. And it was great. I was the only grandchild on both sides, so it was wonderful.
When you went to college, Dad talked about going through college. What were you studying? You said you wanted to be a nurse.
That was it. Took chemistry. It was just freshman and sophomore year, so I had to take freshman and sophomore courses plus some extra chemistry.
If you were able to restart life and be in college again as a young woman, what would you like to study, and what type of career would you like to aspire to if you had to do it all over again?
I can't imagine. I met Jack when I was 15, and one question you should ask is when I first came up here,
Well, sure. Go ahead.
because I was 16, and he invited me to come up to White Lake, his summer home, and we were to be with his grandfather and grandmother in the old cottage, and we drove up in his father's open Packard touring sedan, and with us, did Keith come with us, Jack? He was there that weekend,
I think maybe so.
How old were you?
about 16.
But you had met him when you were...
Earlier, but
Okay.
and anyway, I knew they had a yacht club dance, and I asked him if the girls wore long dresses or short dresses, and he said, "Oh, long dresses." So I was the only one at the yacht club dance in a long dress. There were several horrible things that happened that weekend, but we stuck together.
How did you first meet Mother, Dad?
To the best of my memory, I was driving, and I drove to pick up my sister at Roycemore, and she'd always have some friends and sitting in the back seat, and Teasley was one of those sitting in the back seat. I guess and I didn't
And
pay
then
much
Keith
attention.
brought you to the church.
And then after that, Keith Stevenson, who was at St. Mark's Church in the youth group, said, to got me to go there one evening group or something or other, and your mother Teasley was there. So
Do you remember
that's
your
really-
first impressions of her?
Well, that was the first impression. When she was sitting in the back seat with my sister, I didn't even pay much attention to her.
Yeah. Mother, what were your first impressions? Did you have any at first?
Not particularly, no.
When you formed impressions, what were they like later on, when you started to become friends? Or
Well,
were they?
I was pretty young. I wasn't dating much.
Did you actually date, one-on-one date at that age?
Yes, and but nothing like nowadays. I remember he took me home from something in park down by the lake.
And you were 15, 16?
Yes, and he tried to kiss me, and I
Was
said,
that the first time you tried to kiss a girl, Dad?
No.
No.
I don't know. I don't think so.
And I said, "I'm sorry, no, I don't believe in that." And then he didn't try for a long time until finally I kissed him.
Ah, that was nice. Had you dated before meeting Mother, Dad?
Yeah, I mean most of any dating I remember was up here at White Lake, in which everybody runs in packs. I mean they don't date. They never dated singly necessarily. They mean, or they date, or they go to the yacht club, or they go to. I don't remember the beach parties, which they have now a lot. There were a little bit, but nothing like they have now.
Before we get off of childhood and parents and whatnot, what were the best things that you learned from your parents? What stands out? What pops in your mind first? And Mother, you can start.
Oh my. What type things, David?
Oh, anything like patience or self-discipline or
Well, my
independence
father, as
or
I said,
sense of
was-
humor or...
My father was a disciplinarian and had quite a temper, and so did I. And sometime the two of us would get going and Mother would suffer. But I think they were perfect parents. They were wonderful. Had a lot of fun.
What do you think you learned, or what stands out?
I don't know. I can't. As I said, I never had an argumentative childhood. I never had any crises, things that I necessarily couldn't do, or I'm sure there were a lot of them that.
Did they try to teach you, or did they try to teach by example? Or,
I don't think they ever tried to teach necessarily, or even, I'm not aware of any of that.
Interesting. So going on, you were up here at White Lake. You honeymooned up here. Tell me about that that honeymoon and that.
Well,
and also leading up to marriage, when you started to date more, and your engagement, how that started, and proposal, and all the way up to the honeymoon.
I can't remember any proposal. Can you? I don't remember any.
No,
It was almost sort of
well, we might as well get married.
fact, you know?
Well, what happened when Dad presented an engagement ring?
I don't even remember
I don't
that.
even remember.
I remember giving you a pin for charter
Oh, yeah,
club,
and
but
that's
I don't remember.
because at University of Colorado, all my friends were being pinned. So I said to Jack, how about a pin? Well, he didn't even know if Princeton had one.
Yeah, well, the clubs had them.
Yeah.
Didn't you say the stone fell apart or something?
No, that was the engagement ring.
Okay.
And I remember very little about receiving that ring.
I don't remember it either.
Tell me a little bit about the circumstances leading up to your marriage. What it was, the events, and what went on when you got married.
Well, this was during the war, you realize. And my father was public relations officer at Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, which was an Air Force base. And Jack graduated from Fort Sill and came to St. Louis. And that was where we were married, on my father's post in an Army chapel. And I remember the chaplain was, Lutheran. And he sent away for the Episcopal service. Do you remember that, Jack? And I had no friends there, except Jack's sister, of course, who was my only attendant. And it was a wartime ceremony. I wore a borrowed wedding dress from a girl I knew in Evanston. And Jack will have to tell you about his best man. But anyway, all our relatives came. So we had 4 grandmothers at our wedding, no grandfathers. And after the reception, and Jack and I spent the night in St. Louis. And did you know Dad had gotten us the bridal suite?
Yeah.
Well, Jack had already gotten a room there, so they just let that drop. And the next day we caught the train for Chicago, and there were a lot of the wedding relatives on the train, which made things a little funny. And we got to how'd we get to Holland?
On the train.
On the train, then to Holland, from Chicago to Holland, and picked up again the old Packard touring sedan that Jack's father had left there for us, and drove up here to White Lake.
Dad, what do you remember about the events leading up to the ceremony and what went on?
Well, I hardly even knew when the date was going to be, because we were going through OCS, and that's 90 days of high intensive training and so forth, and so you're working on that, and this was at Fort Sill, Officers Training School, Field Artillery, and in our group was all of our Princeton group, so we still had our own group together and didn't have that tough a time because we already knew all the math and all the hard things in Field Artillery because we'd had it for a couple of years. So we graduate, and that's why the marriage date of September 24th, 1943 was set because I was graduating at that time, at getting second lieutenants. So I didn't have a best man or anything, and I asked a lot of guys, well, they didn't want to go to a wedding. They were going to get their week off before they had to report to whatever duty. But one guy who I knew vaguely was Sid Howell from Princeton, and he said, well, I don't have anything to do. I'll go on. So Sid Howell was my best man. And he came on. Then I never saw him again after that for probably 40 years until I met him again at a college reunion. But that's how deeply involved the best man was. When I arrived on the post, Teasley's father was public relations officer, so he had a lot of control over a lot of things that were done. And I arrived on the post, and they gave me a 13-gun salute, which I didn't know. But apparently, by the book, that's what a second lieutenant got in some cases. They also, for the wedding, her father had scheduled, not for the wedding necessarily, but scheduled a mock battle. So all the wedding party were led out to some bleachers, and a real live bullet, I don't know what it was, live bullet, was set up and performed by a man named Paulman. And he was the activities, or the person who was setting this up. And Paulman, I didn't know, and I don't know what I'm saying, but was a very prominent interior decorator, something.
In New York.
Paulman. So Teasley's father was on pins and needles the whole time that they may have an inspector general come on the post and find out that they were doing this live thing with the Army for a private wedding party.
So this is ammunition and going
Yeah,
off
yeah,
and
they
the
were
whole 9
doing-
yards.
yeah,
A
yeah,
battle at a wedding.
Well, they were doing. I mean, that's what they were doing.
Camouflage.
They were training there
He
anyway.
had a camouflage.
Camouflage. It was a camouflage was the theme of the whole thing. And I don't know, the marriage certificate. Is that interesting?
Yeah.
Enough?
Yeah, what happened there?
Well, Teasley and I went down to get blood tests and the marriage certificate because we didn't have much time. This whole thing took place when I finally realized I was going to get married until I was married about 2 days later. So I didn't really have much chance of getting out of it. Well, we went to get the marriage certificate, and I know the morning of the marriage, I was talking with my father, and he said, well, let me have the marriage certificates because I have to give it to the minister, and I couldn't find it any place. And he allowed us out. Maybe I was not old enough yet to get married. But anyway, we finally found the marriage certificate, and as far as I know, it was made legal.
I guess so.
I guess so.
One thing that when I say we, my generation, that followed, all the generations that followed your generation really, except for the Vietnam War, have not had the experience of living when the world was at war. And just give me a few impressions of what it was like. And you told me that it really didn't start for the United States, at least on the mainland, until after Pearl Harbor. And what were your first impressions when you heard that the Japanese had attacked at Pearl Harbor, and what and how was life changed for you and for the country, and how the mentality changed, and just kind of list the events leading up to when Dad was sent overseas?
Well, I was at the University of Colorado when war was declared, and I remember they called a special assembly, and our main hall wouldn't hold all the students at one time, so they set out microphones out in front, and we listened to Roosevelt when he said we were at war. And we had many Japanese exchange students there.
Really?
And we remember how visibly upset they were, and which made us equally upset. And soon thereafter, a Japanese language school was started at the University of Colorado. It was the first one in the country. And they were all men, young men who were there. And we were very interested in seeing them. And of course, it was traumatic. My father went back into the Second World War, into the Air Corps, and he was sent overseas way before Jack was.
And he was also in World War One.
Yes. But he never went overseas in World War One. But so when Jack left, I went to live with them in St. Louis.
Dad?
Well, you know, everybody knows where they were on Pearl Harbor. Everybody knows where they were when Kennedy was shot. And everybody knows where they were at September 11th. And I've about decided that every generation has to have some date. If they don't have it, they'll make it up someplace along the line as the definitive date of where they were and so forth. So you always know where you were on anybody would know where they were on December 7th. And December 7th was not very different from September 11th in that you really didn't know what was going on, but it was coming over the radio, of course, and it was a disaster, and it was a U.S. disaster, etc. But you really didn't know the background effects or why, or you didn't know there was a big Japanese invasion fleet that had been planned for a long time. Didn't know anything. And you didn't really care, frankly. On the Princeton campus, I remember hearing it on the loudspeakers as we were walking across the campus, and then everybody gets together to discuss it. And the one defining thing, though, on my generation is that the minute Pearl Harbor came along, within a week, you knew what you were going to do. It wasn't what job you were going to get, or whether you were going to find yourself, or whether you're going to take a year off for Europe, or whatever it is. It was automatically decided. Now, you may not know what you were going to do, but you knew you were going to be involved in the war one way or another, and so you began to get your ducks in line. In my case, I was in the ROTC, so I knew that's what I was going to do. But within a week or two, everybody was rushing down to enlist in the Navy, or the this or the that, or trying to get connections, and with everybody. Actually, the feeling, the war, this was a big adventure. This was kind of I won't say a fun thing, but this was a real big adventure. It wasn't a horror thing. It wasn't, you aren't going to go off and get killed. Yeah, you might get killed, but that wasn't what it was. It was a real kind of a fun, kind of a real big, the adventure of your life. And I don't remember any politics of the thing. I don't remember anything. Now everybody analyzes everything that goes on before it goes on. We didn't do any of that kind of
We
stuff.
were young.
Well, you're young, but even the young now get to analyzing everything. It just says, you're supposed to go over to Germany and they're fighting a war. They've been doing it for the last 3 or 4 years, and let's go in and get it over with. And even during the war, I don't ever remember hating the Germans per se, or maybe they had motivated enough. You heard all the horror stories that come out of any war. Some of them are made up. A lot of them are made up, but they happen, and they happen on both sides. So there never was, as far as I was concerned, any animosity. Now that may not be true for those that went to the Pacific, because they fought for a longer time, and they fought under more adverse conditions than we did. By the time I got over into the fighting, we were chasing the Germans, mostly. So that's the college era.
What was your initial responsibilities? What were you initially trained for, and what did you initially do when you were sent over? I guess you said Scotland, and tell me a little bit about the events leading up to being deployed overseas, what you were trained to do, your responsibilities, and Mother also what you went through just before he was stationed overseas, your feelings and.
Well, I knew it was inevitable. I mean, it wasn't. We were all in the same boat. I was extremely lucky because so many of my friends married around the same time to boys they didn't know well, and who said, I'm going overseas, please marry me, business. So I was very fortunate, and after we were married, it was inevitable that he was going overseas. And we were together exactly a little over a year. And so when it came, it was no surprise. And, well,
What did you do when he was sent over? What did you do during, at least initially, when he was overseas? What were your
Well,
job or your activities?
I went back to, did I go back to St. Louis? Yeah.
Yeah, you went, no, I think your mother had gone to Chicago at that time. I don't know.
Oh yes. Mother and Dad had gone back to Chicago.
You were at the
Dad
church.
came home before Jack went overseas. And he went back to work for the telephone company, and they were living in Chicago, and I joined them there. And I got a job in a dermatologist's office where I worked almost 2 years as #1 girl. It was fun. And I lived in an apartment hotel in Chicago. So I would come by elevated to Evanston, where my doctor worked, back out to. And by then, my friends' husbands were coming home, which was
That must have been tough.
a little disconcerting.
Yes.
Yeah. But
What were your responsibilities at first, Dad?
Well, we were married at Jefferson Barracks, and we spent a week up, or roughly a week, at White Lake, and then I had to report immediately to Fort Sill, back to Fort Sill, where I was going to an extended course, which was to survey school. SEAL Artillery does a lot of surveying in, and so I was supposed to be a survey officer. And Teasley went with me, and we drove out in a car to Fort Sill. This is a week after being married, and got caught in a big snowstorm out there. And the car slid off the road. It was the middle of the night, and we'd been married a week at that time. And finally, a patrol came along with a man. I've forgotten what his name is.
no, it was an ambulance.
It was an ambulance came along and saw us on the side of the road.
A hearse, rather.
Hearse, yeah, hearse.
With a
And
body in the back.
Wait a minute, and picked us up. And again, it's the middle of the night, to take us into the nearest town, which was Cement, Oklahoma. And so the three of us are sitting in the front seat, and he said, I hope the four of us have a nice time. And what he meant was there was a body in the back. But he dropped us off in Cement, Oklahoma, and the Ford car dealer, and I've forgotten what their name is because we kept track of it, took us in, now 2 o'clock at night, put Teasley up on the upstairs floor, and I went back with this guy to see if our car, which had slid off the road, decided we couldn't do anything about it then, so we came back, and again, I stayed at these people's house, and the next day we went out with records and got the car, but they were very nice to us, and we kept track of them for many years after that, although we never saw them again. Went to Fort Sill. I went through, and Teasley then had to get a place to live at Fort Sill for 2 of us, which she did. And I went through survey school, graduated from survey school, and we got our first assignment to the 81st, I think it was the 81st Infantry Division in St. Louis Obispo. And the 2 of us went out there. I don't know how, but it was probably by car. We had a car, was it a Studebaker? I think it was a
Well, I
Studebaker.
remember
think it
I
was a blue
sat
Studebaker.
in the, what was it, something aid
In the Red Cross aid.
office, waiting for somebody to phone in that they had a room or something to take us in. And I finally got one in a sort of a rooming house. And Jack was gone most of the time. and especially on this night business that he'll tell you about. And I remember eating, I had a little sterno stove, and I would heat sea rations to eat, or else I'd go out to this truck stop where they always had great big breakfasts and have breakfast. It was fun. I worked for the Red Cross. I was a gray lady or something like that. And because I knew a little French, I supposedly helped French women write to their husbands overseas.
Oh. Huh.
And all that was fun. It was,
Well, in Obispo, what I was doing, reported to this division, and they were way overstocked on officers and I guess everything else, and they were preparing to go overseas, and they did shortly thereafter to the Pacific. But in doing so, they got us, a group of us, and I was one of them, to go into ranger training. And ranger training meant that you were to be an assault troop off ships.
Yeah.
And go ashore, and I remember many nights, and so I worked at night mostly, and they put you in blackface. It was like playing cops and robbers, growing up cops and robbers. We painted faces, and they would take a small, they weren't destroyers, but a small ship offshore, a couple of miles offshore in the middle of the night, put nets over the side, and you have to climb on those and climb into boats. I've forgotten whether they were rubber boats,
they were
but
rubber
boats.
things.
And you'd storm ashore on the sand dunes at Obispo, which are still there. And you carried live ammunition, and you went up and blew up things and all that kind of stuff. And then in the morning, they assembled on the beach, and they had a campfire, and they'd give you something to eat, usually sea rations or something.
Must have
Then
been
you
a
go-
blast.
Then you go home.
Literally.
Yeah, I say,
It's
it
fun.
was just like grown-up cops and robbers.
Right.
But he would come home to our one little room with all this black stuff on his face.
And, but I didn't do much artillery stuff. They were just putting us to work doing something with it. Then that division got called to go overseas, and we were all surplus. So we got, I got orders to report to Fort Hood to form the 548th Field Artillery Battalion. And one of the colonels that were in this group, and I'd never met him before because the colonel was a big man as far as I was concerned, was assigned to the same, to run as officer, head officer, or chief, whatever he is, commander of the 548th Field Artillery Battalion. And someplace or other, I said that we had a car and we were going to stop off in the Grand Canyon. He said, well, I'd like to go along with you. So for a first lieutenant who's just out, and I have a colonel who was a little bit, but he was kind of shy himself.
Yes, he was.
So he rode out there
His
with
name
us.
was Kerr.
Colonel Kerr.
Yeah.
And he was the field artillery commander. He's the one we went overseas with and so forth. And when we got down to Camp Hood, he reverted to his position, and I reverted to my position.
I don't think
But
I ever saw him again.
You may not have seen it. I went to Hood, and now we were forming a unit, which we knew was going to go overseas and was a cohesive unit and so forth. And Teasley went and trying to find, it was always a struggle trying to find a place to stay. And they went to about 40 miles away.
Oh,
What was
yeah.
it? No, I've forgotten the name.
What was
the
it
name of the
called?
town?
Anyway,
They did
the
a
boy, the men, I was with different women we'd met in the service, called the same way. And we found lodging, we found a house, I found a house that was very nice. And, but the boys, men, only got home twice a week. They came home Wednesday night and
Sunday night,
Saturday night.
Saturday
Hmm.
night. Yeah.
And went back Sunday. So we girls would get together and go out to dinner and do different things.
Lawton, Oklahoma. No, that was in Oklahoma.
Oh.
I forgot the name.
Waco. No, not Waco. Anyway.
Right. So you were in the artillery, and you were assigned to a battalion.
Yeah, it's a separate battalion. It was a unit that was designed to operate completely independently, so they could just take this unit up and put it any place. And It wasn't in a line of command, and that's the way we served. Overseas, we were assigned to the Ninth Army for a while, and some we shot for the British and the Canadians.
Tell the story when you had your guns sent over to
Well,
Scotland.
when we got assignment to go overseas, since I was the officer at the guns, I was a second lieutenant, later became a first lieutenant, and we had to prepare the guns to go overseas, which means you got a cosmoline or grease tubes. Now these are 155 millimeter guns, so the tubes are, I've forgotten how many, but like 21
feet.
probably 30 feet long,
Wow.
something like
Yeah.
that. And somebody got the bright idea that we couldn't get any bourbon overseas, so we got a perfect packing thing, and a bourbon bottle would fit into the tube, so we just packed the tubes of the 4 guns with bourbon, and I used to know how many bourbon bottles a 155 tube could, because it's not in the manuals, would hold. So we packed them in and packed our ships and figured we'd get our guns at the other end, but that never happened. The guns that we picked up when we finally got to England were somebody else's. And so we never saw that. Somebody that got our guns must have had a surprise.
So you were telling me, Mother, about the days just before he was sent over. You were following him, trying to get together with him.
One more time.
One more time.
Yeah. And I told you all this, didn't I?
Well, you told me, but you didn't tell everybody else.
Well, Mother and Dad had old friends that lived in New Jersey. And so I asked them if I could come stay with them, because Jack, last time he called, said he might be able to see me. So I went to their house, and they were so nice and wanted to take me around and everything, but I just sat by the phone waiting for Jack to call, and then finally he did, and he couldn't get off. And farewell. That was it.
Yeah, we went out of Camp Kilmer in
Yeah.
New Jersey, which was a place where many, many, many people going overseas went. It was a processing center that shipped overseas.
So,
I went over on the Ile-de-France.
Ile-de-France. So you were overseas, Mother's back here. How did you keep in touch, and how frequently did you hear from Dad?
I wrote every day and numbered the letters because they never arrived to him or his to me in exactly the same sequence. And it was seemed like a very long time, but as I said, I worked for a dermatologist for 2 years, and I enjoyed that. I had my own apartment, and I also said that many of my friends' husband had come home, so that I saw my old friends and some of the husbands. And finally, the war ended, but maybe you want to say.
Yeah. How often did you hear from Dad?
Spasmodically, he was writing me every day too.
So spasmodically,
Sometime I'd get 10 letters,
all at
one
once.
mail.
And then how long would there be no letters?
Maybe a couple of weeks or so.
And did you have friends that lost their husbands that you knew?
Actually, I don't.
Not many.
I didn't have many who
You didn't?
did. That was very fortunate. Not many of them had married.
That must have helped in
You know.
your situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dad, when you were over there, did you face any? What was your situation? How far were you from front lines? What was your job? You had long-range artillery, so what exactly did that mean you were doing when you were controlling these long guns?
Well, as a group, we disembarked in Scotland in a place called Greenock, Greenock,
Greenock.
Scotland, and got on, I remember marching through the town in the middle of the night, and then getting on a train and going down to England, or really Wales, it was right on the border, to Hereford, a town called Hereford, outside on Foxcroft Manor. And that was, it had a hospital, which meant there were nurses in the hospital, and this area that a lot of our field artillery groups had been processed through. And this was in probably late October or November. And the idea was...
Of what year again?
This was in 1943, I think. And the idea was we were probably going to be there a month and probably go over in December or early January. We're scheduled to go over to France and into the lines. In the meantime, why the Ardennes offensive took place over Christmas, and so the Americans were thrown back a lot, and they delayed our departure. So we didn't go over to France until probably March, something of that kind. And we had when we had all trained in as prime mover, we pulls the guns, because these are big guns, were 7.5-ton trucks. But when we got over there, they had found that 7.5-ton trucks, you get off the roads and they got mired down. So we really had Caterpillar tractors, and they were kind of like a tank, but they didn't have all the armor on it. And we got over theirs, and we went into position 5 or 6 or 7 times. That means putting the guns down, getting everything ready, and digging the foxholes and everything else, and never shot, never fired anything. But we were in on the crossing of the Elbe River, which was a big battle, and the Rhine was even more spectacular. We were probably 4 miles, maybe 3 miles back of the Rhine River when they crossed it. So we could shoot 15 miles, so we could shoot maybe 10, 12 miles over the Rhine.
Over the advancing troops
Over the
to
advancing
soften up
troops
the
that came in. And
other side.
the Rhine crossing was spectacular because we fired from probably 11 o'clock at night to 4 a.m. in the morning, just constantly firing at what they call on-call targets. And that was just wherever anybody, a forward observer, had asked for the fire, you'd fire in. And then as dawn broke, the bombers started coming over. And then for about an hour, there was nothing but the skies was black with bombers bombing. Then there was about a pause of maybe an hour. And the next thing that came over were paratroopers. And and you can see all this overhead. Paratroopers were dropped. And then came the gliders. And the gliders were wooden planes, motorless, made of plywood, designed to crash on landing. And they would carry small guns as well as men. And then when all of this was landed, in the meantime, our guns were silent for 6-7 hours. Then you began getting calls for fire on certain points that were resistance points. And then that stopped. And the next thing you got was what they called, I've forgotten what they call it, advanced fire or something. All the guns lay down one line of fire. Then you crank the handle up one, and that same line of fire advances 50 yards. And the infantry is behind all of this. So you're laying this curtain of fire down in the infantry. And, occasionally you have an errant shot that doesn't have the power, and it lands on your own troops. So that's called friendly fire.
Do you know if that ever happened from your...
Oh, I'm sure it did. I don't know specifically, but I mean, that's one of the things you ran into.
Right.
And so that was, the Rhine River was a spectacular, and anybody that was in it, no matter what they were doing, remembers it because it was a big, big, big show. Probably the largest thing that they had.
When did you first see any signs of the enemy?
Well, the first ones were dead ones that were alongside the road. Then after the breakout, if you know the history, they got stalled. Patton really had a chance to clean it up, and he ran out of fuel. Because in any war, the supply is almost as as important, if not more so, than the actual fighting of it. So when you finally had the breakthroughs and so forth, and now you were traveling as much as 30 miles, 20, 30 miles a day, and sometimes you'd stop and fire. Now you saw all kinds of
Animals?
German troops, animals, carts, displaced. The roads, the main problem was clearing the roads, because you had all these people coming back, and you were trying to go forward, and you didn't see a whole lot of fighting at that time, although we did get ambushed once. And we got shot at by jet airplanes. The Americans didn't have any jets, but the Germans at the very tail end got some jets into the air, and they were so much faster than anything that we had. But they were not very effective, because when they come down with machine gun fire, the machine guns, one bullet would land one place, then 50 yards down the road, the next one would land. So it wasn't that effective.
So when you were ambushed, what happened there? Was there shots fired at you at that time, or?
Well, a field artillery unit, particularly the big guns like that, are behind the lines because they're not at all effective short range, and they're very, very vulnerable. So they have to have somebody protecting them. I mean, you're sitting out there in a field or something, and this happened to be two German tanks were in a wooded area and shot at us, and our best defense against that were the bazookas, the handheld bazooka guns. And we fired into them, and they left. They didn't hit them. They just left.
So you were part of the occupation in Germany, or were you shipped out right away? And then where did you go towards the end of the war? And when did you join up with Mother again?
Well, the war was over, and I guess most people know the day the war was over. I don't really remember the exact day the war was over.
No, but remember, you thought you might have to go to Japan.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the war is over, so now things are finished, so now they're relocating the American troops.
When you're saying the war is over, the European?
European war.
War.
European war, whenever that was. I don't know when it was. It was in like June or, no, it was like June, let's say June or July of 1944. And so we are, as a unit, we were sent down as an occupation force down to a town called Bamberg, Germany, which is north of Fürth, north of Nuremberg. It was a small town, very nice town, not particularly destroyed. And so we were there as an occupation troop. And so we were there all that 3, 4, 5 months. And of course, now you got a whole lot of guys with nothing to do, basically, so they keep busy. And it was at that time that one of the things you could do was sign up and go to France and go to school for a month at the Sorbonne, but you had to speak French. Well, I didn't speak French very well, but I said I did. So I went to Paris for a month to the Sorbonne to take French architecture, which was mostly lectures, of which I didn't really understand anything that was going on, but fortunately they didn't give any exams at the end. And so that got us to, that time it got me to meet a woman that a good friend of ours had helped liberate, Drew Tartier, or Drew, she then married and became Drew Parsons. And Teasley had said, look her up, and I looked her up, and she was married to the guy who was the editor of the Herald Tribune, and she figured, why don't you get back to Paris? So I decided that instead of going to Japan, everybody was recirculating back to Japan.
Right.
Actually, very few ever. The Japanese War wound up before most of those really, they went back to the United States. And a lot of them were discharged in the United States. I wasn't that far, so I said, rather than now go back to the United States, I'd like to stayed a little bit in Paris. And so I went back to Paris, and I'll quit here in just a minute. And you had to get some kind of job, so I got a job with the State Department in something called the Office of Foreign Liquidation. And said, Teasley, why don't you come over?
And you were working for the dermatologist the
Right.
whole time?
The whole time.
Okay.
And at that time, it was very difficult to get visas to go, certainly from America to Europe.
Sure.
And Jack's father, some way, helped me get a passport. And so I was all set to go, and Mother and Dad drove me to New York. I was going on an old troop ship that had been a troop ship. It was a Grace Line boat called the Santa Paula. And so Mother and Dad, we went to New York, and it was delayed and delayed and delayed and going. And Jack's sister, T, came down from Smith. Mother and Dad had to go back, and I remember T bringing me a bottle of champagne. Well, I got on the ship, and I was shown down to a cabin way below deck that had 2 baby cribs in it and 4 bunks. It'd been used to ferry Europeans back to America and vice versa. And no class. So I went up on deck to wave goodbye to Jack's sister. And when I went back down, here was this interesting looking woman sitting on one of the bunks, surrounded by reporters. And I thought, well, who's this? So I was introduced, and her name was Madame Clemenceau. And she had married the tiger's son before the war, and she was from Indiana, American woman.
Describe who the tiger.
Peoria, Illinois.
Peoria, Illinois, that's right.
Describe who the tiger was. The tiger's son, who Clemenceau was.
Well, Clemenceau was the premier of France during World War I.
Yeah.
Was the leader, really, during World War I. This was his son.
But unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that. So.
Oh, well, anyway, she was most interesting. And because she was who she was, the captain would ask us to dinner. And there was, as I said, no class in the dining room. There were long trestle tables. And there was, you ate when they told you to eat and stuff like that. But it was exciting voyage for me, because I was going to Dad. And we pulled into Le Havre, which had been bombed, and they only had a floating pier. And as we pulled into Le Havre, I thought, I was out on deck, I thought I saw a soldier standing on this promontory, waving, and I was sure it was Jack. But it turned out he and his driver were in a local bar drinking when the boat pulled into the floating pier.
Ha.
Well,
And didn't you play a joke on?
well, yeah, the story goes that I finally got off the boat, and I borrowed a baby, some people going back to their homeland, and told Jack that it was ours. And it was only a few months old.
Well, we've been parted for 2 years.
Excellent.
But the ride back, Jack had gotten a command car and a driver, and we drove from Le Havre back to Paris. And remember, we had a flat tire in some little town, and the mayor and his wife invited us in their house while they were fixing the tire. Do you remember all
Yeah,
that?
and went down the cellar and got some
Yeah.
fancy wine and broke up, but you know.
Wow.
And, well, just to break in here for a minute, because Laurel, I think, who has spent a lot of her life as horses, was very much surprised that I had anything at all to do with horses, which isn't very much. But the one thing that I did probably, I rode horses when I was in the West, and when I was in tuberculosis, but in ROTC at Princeton, we did a lot of math, artillery math, but we never really did anything with guns at all. The guy that was head of it at Princeton was an old cavalry officer. So he was a stickler on that everybody should ride. And it used to be that horses pulled the guns. They didn't do it anymore. So all we would do twice a week for 2 hours would ride horses in an armory and do what, it isn't dressage, but parading. You'd parade in single file, and then you'd cross an X, and then you'd dismount, and you'd stand still, and you'd do all that kind of stuff. And all I remember of ROTC was riding horses, which I didn't do very well, but you didn't have to do it very well. So if Laurel is interested, that's really the extent of my
When you were at Princeton, you did excel, I think, in academics. You graduated cum laude, if I'm correct?
Correct. Yeah, I graduated cum laude, but practically everybody graduates cum laude today from universities.
Oh, that's not true.
Well, I mean, they all get high grade. Yes, I graduated cum laude, but I didn't excel. As a matter of fact, I failed 2 courses in college. I failed French, and I failed statistics. So, as a consequence, the first job I ever had, which was in Paris, obviously working for the government, and I was head of a statistics department in Paris, France. So that's what my education did for me.
Did you have any dreams of an ideal career while you were at Princeton and before the war, of what you wanted to be?
I don't think ever. I don't think you ever were headed for anything. The only probably career that I really decided I wanted to do one time was go into the State Department, and that's what I was in Paris, and I actually took and passed the written exams, but never took the verbals. And I finally decided that if you're going to go to work for the State Department, you probably would be promoted on your merit for the first maybe 10, 15 years, and after that, unless you had somebody back in Washington who was really promoting you, or you had a lot of money, you weren't going to get a whole lot further. And that's probably true.
What were your dreams as far as career was concerned at University of Colorado? I know you were in nursing school, but were there any aspirations as far as a particular career besides nursing?
Not then,
okay.
certainly.
Okay.
No.
Laurel also asked, and Cindy asked some questions. One was regarding your favorite theatrical role.
Oh, well, I think I mentioned that I was active in the drama club at Royce-Moore, and then I also told you I played men's parts because I was the tallest.
Was there a particular role or play that you enjoyed most? Or?
Not necessarily. I remember being quite proud that I was chosen to be in one of the children's theater plays, which was presented in Evanston, and they decided they'd take a couple of Royce-Moore students. The other cast was always from the public schools, and I think I was the fairy godmother in Cinderella, but nothing.
And Laurel asked about the dogs, the pets that you had.
Oh, well, I had a wire-haired terrier during my growing up years, and named Beau, B-E-A-U, after Beaugest, who was Beaugest? He was somebody.
After named Beaugest. Beaugest. He was.
I asked who he was.
He was a French Foreign Legion.
Okay, and how I got the name Beau, I don't know. And then Jack and I had poodles, And our first poodle that was with us a number of years was named Bo. And Bo unfortunately met his demise at White Lake, Michigan. And then we had Gigo, our last poodle. And when we went overseas later, we gave him to the man who, upholsterer, did a cast. Yeah, those were my pets.
Actually, the first boy I ever had was a poodle in Paris, France. We bought it as a puppy, and we were in an apartment.
Standard.
It was a standard, but he bought it as a puppy. And what do you do
He
for
got
a dog?
distemper.
He got distemper.
And there were no shots then.
Yeah, they had no shots there, and I remember we had to put him in the bathroom because he was defecating all over it. And I remember he went blind, and you could hear him in the middle of the night
Yeah.
bumping into the
And
thing.
Blanche and I took him to a vet. Blanche went with me.
That leads to your living in Paris after the war, and I know that was a very, very special time for both of you, and you have lots of great memories. Mother, you want to talk about your life in Paris after the war?
Well, your father should start because he's the one that got the apartment on Avenue Foch, which used to be the Avenue Bois de Boulogne. And tell about the apartment, how you got it, Jack.
Well, I got the apartment because I heard that a general of some kind, small general, was leaving, and he was leaving this apartment. So I contacted, I got the name of the owner and went over to the owner, and sure, there was a Madame Labinal who owned the apartment. It was a ground floor apartment, and I went over and made the deal with her, and I offered her French francs. Well, she didn't want any, at that time they were occupation francs. Well, she didn't want anything to do with those, and I offered her dollars, and she didn't want that either. She preferred cigarettes, and so we settled that the apartment would be 11 cartons of cigarettes a month. And since we could get cigarettes on ration, I think you could have one a week, something like that, for 50 cents. That was a pretty good deal.
What
But
was
the
the
apartment.
exact address again of the apartment?
It was 42 Avenue Foch. And it was a wonderful apartment. It was on the ground floor. We had our own garden.
What year again and what time was this?
Oh,
This was in the spring of 1945.
45, right. And there were not many American women there. And we had a Jeep as our means of transportation. But the apartment was lovely, and with it came a maid, Blanche. And I'll never forget, Jack moved into the apartment before I got there. And the first morning after I had gotten there, I heard this little noise in the hall, and Blanche was wheeling down the little table with our breakfast to our room. Well, I got so embarrassed, I remember running into the bathroom and hiding. But I soon got used to getting breakfast in bed. But Blanche became quite a member of our family. And however, she was just there in the daytime, and at night I would cook. The kitchen was in the basement with a dumb waiter coming up to the dining room. And after dinner, I just pile the dishes on the dumb waiter and wheel it down to down below, and Blanche would wash them the next morning.
Well, it sounds like what you've described so far, a very comfortable life. What were some of the hardships or the unusual conditions?
We had a very
after war.
comfortable life. We got our rations through the army. We got things that French people couldn't get. If I went to the French market, I would have to stand in line and, with the French. I might add that I no sooner got off the boat in Le Havre than I got pregnant. So.
Surprise, surprise.
Huh?
Surprise, surprise, yeah.
And so I went to an army doctor that was outside of town, and I would drive the Jeep It was quite a way out of town, as I remember.
It was in Nui.
The Army post.
Yeah.
And I would go like once a month on Thursday or something. Well, I couldn't go one Thursday. And I went on Tuesday. And when I arrived, the nurse said, "Oh, Miss Denison, I'm sorry, you can't come today. This is VD day." But oh, we had a wonderful time in Paris, didn't we?
What were you up to, Dad?
Well, the Office of Foreign Liquidation was something that was set up to handle all of the real estate and all of the excess Army equipment and everything that was left in Europe. And they were either giving it away to UNRWA, United Nations Relief Organization, or selling it or something. So it was mainly inventorying what they had in Germany and France and whatever, wherever. And to inventory it, we had in the office, of which there were 3 of us to get started with, we had...
I'm sorry, the department was named Liquidation?
Now the carpet was called Office of Foreign Liquidation Corporation, but it was run by the State Department, and we were employed by the State Department. And there were 4 of us that got started in this thing.
How about Janine?
Well, Janine was, Janine was our
who
French
was
secretary.
Janine?
That was a very attractive secretary. So and she's the one that, and she got interested in Teasley and introduced Teasley to some gentleman who hung around a lot too.
What was that gentleman's name?
His name was
Palisse.
Monsieur Palisse. No, his wife was a good friend of mine, Andre Palisse, French woman.
And the wife just kept telling Teasley, "Don't worry about him. I mean, he's always been philandering all my life, so don't worry." But the OFLC office had equipment in it made by IBM. And it was 3 pieces of equipment. There were it was a card sorter, basically. So you punched the cards with the information for the inventory, then you had a sorter to sort the cards, and then you could print out the list of the inventory that you had. And obviously, IBM then came on to the computer, but that was the basis of the computer. I also learned something when you're working for the government. There were 4 people who started this office, and by the time I finished, about 10 months later, there were, I think, 60 people running it, and I don't think we were doing any more work at all, but consequently you got your pay increased by the number of people you were working for, so I early on had
We
education.
were fortunate enough to, as Jack mentioned earlier, meet this Drew Tartier, who was married to the editor of the Paris Herald Tribune, and they were simply wonderful to us.
Must have been well connected and took you to interesting parties.
We were only 24 and 22
Wow.
years old, and
Wow.
they were just wonderful to us.
I think a lot of people listening don't appreciate how young
Yeah.
everyone was.
And that one night, Ogden Reed was in town, and who was head of the
Well, he owned the New York Herald
yeah, and
Tribune.
you tell about when we went out with him.
Well, I have to explain first of all who Drew was. Drew was a real wheeler dealer. Through all her life, she'd been a blonde temptress in the movies. She'd gone to France. She'd lived through the occupation, living in France mainly by her wits, and she knew how to take care of herself. And she was a good-looking gal. And so the war was over, and she married. Her own husband had been killed during the war, so she married Jeff Parsons, who was editor of the New York Herald Tribune International Division.
Well, tell how you got an introduction to her through Charlie.
Well, I did. I said it was through a friend. I met her originally through a friend of ours, Charlie Whipple, who had, that was another long story, who had kind of liberated her, was the first American soldier that she had seen.
And he was married to a friend of mine.
So that was the introduction. And but on this, so their boss is Ogden Reed, who owns the paper in New York, and and the only people that were getting back to Europe at this time were the movie people and the newspaper people and the diplomatic crowd. So Ogden Reed is coming to Paris with his new wife, who had been his secretary, and he's kind of on his last legs. He had cancer. I think he died shortly thereafter. So Drew said, why don't you have him over to your house for cocktails first? And cocktails meant champagne, because
That's
you
all,
couldn't,
yeah.
champagne you could get, but you couldn't get scotch and some of the, very easily you could, but it was very different. So Ogden Reed arrives with them, and he had a car, and he had I don't know if he had a driver, but they had cocktails there. Then we went on to dinner, and we had wine with dinner, and then we had drinks after dinner, and then we went to a nightclub and we had drinks. In the meantime, Teasley, at 22 years old, I guess, had only been to France about 48 hours. And this was her introduction. Then we decided we'd go someplace else with some more drinks, and finally about 3 a.m. we decided, well, we'll go and watch the newspaper being put to bed. So we went there, and they toasted us because the owner is there with some brandy. So now we're ready to go home, and Ogden Reed, who was very much a gentleman, offered to drive us home, and he got off out of the car, and Teasley got up, and I got up, and the gentleman walked us up the path, up the driveway to our apartment, and I opened the apartment to say goodbye, and Teasley stepped in, and I turned around to say goodbye to Ogden Reed, and he turned, and then I turned around to look at Teasley, and she's flat on the floor, passed out. So I figured by that time I met a lady who could hold it as long as she had to. And that was really Teasley's introduction to Paris, France, and she's loved it ever since.
Oh, adored it. And Annie, of course.
Didn't you also get to meet a girl by the name of Marlene?
Yeah, and that was through Drew Tartier, Drew Parsons again, and that was before Teasley came over there, because Drew, she's now wife of the editor, and of course the editor wants to see everybody coming through Paris on the way, and so Drew had a dinner table up on 18 Quai d'Orléans, yeah, on Ile Cité, a top floor apartment. Not a big apartment, very nice, and a big fireplace and a dining room. And she could hold about 8 at her dining room table. And it would always be Everett L. Shirer coming through, or Jimmy Burns, or some movie people, and all these names. And she would call me up maybe at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, because I was going to the Sorbonne at that time. And Jack so-and-so can't come, do you want to come to the table? In other words, I was the fill-in. Mm-hmm. And I was also the token young American soldier, which had, and very important to make the group a compatible group. Mm-hmm. So I had the opportunity to meet these various people, and one of them was, she was late and made her enter, was Marlene Dietrich. But she was just like any other ordinary person, except when she comes into the room, there's no question about who's commanding the room. But she was sitting down at the fireplace with her famous legs crossed and talking about her daughter and what a tramp she was, and she couldn't get her straightened out and so forth. And at that time, Dietrich was in Paris and living with Jean Gabin. And I think in the end, he gave her the boot, and she would never, but that was one. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of movie people, and I don't remember their names.
And how long were you in France, and when did you come back?
Well, I was there from the spring of 45, and
came back.
I was only there the spring of 45, and then we came back in December of that year.
She was only there 7 months.
Okay. And I was quite pregnant on the boat. We came back on the United States and came to Evanston, to Jack's mother and father's house. We were there for Christmas, weren't we?
Yeah. And then went to Detroit, and Cade was born in Detroit. There's maybe one other story that I've told lots of times. Again, it involves Drew Tartier. She said, I've got somebody coming, and they're coming down to, she owned, I think, not a chateau, but a country house, a nice country house
Wow.
in Barbizon, which is south of Paris. And she said, well, you pick up this guy, bring him down because he doesn't have a car.
For the weekend.
For the weekend, fine. And we had the Jeep, fine. Where is he going to be? And well, pick him up at the hotel. I've forgotten the hotel. It may be in the Maurice. But so I stopped and picked this guy up, and
He sat in the back seat.
and I said, sit in the back seat, and we'll go on down. So he did. He got in the back seat, and we got about partway down there. I had a flat tire. So I got out to fix the flat tire, and this guy's sitting in the back.
There we
And
go.
I said, come on and help me. And he said, well, you're very apologetic. Okay, I'm sorry, and but tell me what to do. So we got down and changed the thing, and he got back in, and we went on down to Barbizon. And Drew then reintroduced the guy to me as Averil Harriman. Now, that's probably the only tire that Averil Harriman ever
But I remember
changed.
he was very nice,
nice
and we
guy.
had a good,
Oh,
fun
yeah.
time at Drew's that weekend.
And we had to go out and cut firewood because you had to do everything yourself. And he went out, chopping wood like everybody else. But that was the time.
Everything was different,
Yeah.
David.
Yeah.
It was,
You got invited to somebody who was maybe high up in the French thing, and you brought a dozen eggs
yeah.
for dinner.
No one had the
Because they didn't have
No.
eggs.
attitudes that people
And we
have
played,
now.
one thing they did play was bridge. And I remember going to Madame
Police.
Police's house to play bridge. And you just had to know, Pique
Sans
and Cour
Pique, Cour,
and Club and Dimon. And what was the other
Pass. Pass. Sans atro.
Sans atro. And that was fun too. The whole experience.
Did you travel outside of Paris, the two of you, much?
Yeah, we made several trips to Paris. We made one trip to Frankfurt, at
By
which at the
train.
time, because the war is still kind of winding down, and they had a couple of army, a major and an army American,
In
who'd been
prison.
caught stealing some crown jewels or something, and they were in
In our hotel,
in a hotel.
imprisoned.
Yeah, imprisoned in the hotel up over the railroad station.
They were having the Nuremberg trials then.
Yeah, that's
Do
right.
you remember reading
Oh,
about
sure,
that?
sure, of course.
And
That was all part of that.
this was all part of it. And we also got to Rome. And it gotten quite warm at that time.
We
And,
flew to Rome.
yes, and I was getting quite pregnant at that point. But I remember going down into the catacombs with the candles. Oh gosh.
I remember flying back from Rome. We flew to Marseille and then up from Marseille, and she was quite pregnant, not feeling very well, and the plane was kind of rough. And the seats were just kind of sling seats, but they had baggage in the middle of it. So she lay down in the baggage, on top of the
'Cause it was
baggage in the
rough.
middle of the aisle because it was more comfortable.
Did you feel that any national pride, sense of mission, that you were making the world a better place as part of the American Army, or were you living more in the present, in the daily activities, and enjoying your own life rather than feeling a sense that you were part of history in a big tide of change?
I think we should mention that about Annie and Artie de Vlasian, who Jack had met them before I came over. And they became quite a part of our life in France, didn't they?
Yeah, I met Annie because she was a good-looking French girl on the street, and I just talked with her, and she took her home for dinner or something with her husband, Artie, who worked for the Appellation Contrôlée, which
You
is,
call me.
and what would happen, and they were about our age, and it took maybe 5 to 10 hours to get a telephone call through to the United States. So I'd do it from their apartment, and I'd lay down on their couch and go to sleep, so when the phone rang, we could do that. And, you know, they were interested in American the same
And
age.
she was going to have a baby too.
She was gonna have, so there was a lot of, and we've obviously kept up with them
We saw 'em.
all along since then. But when you came back, you just decided it was time, but you're talking about politics and all of that kind of
Doesn't
thing.
seem like you were
You didn't-
very connected. in
I
that.
didn't, you didn't care, I
Right.
mean, you knew what was going on.
Yeah.
You knew what was going on.
Yeah.
But it wasn't what's happened in this country. I mean, the Vietnam War is what brought all that. Everybody got all excited about the politics of the war rather than the war itself. And there was, I don't remember being nationalistic or.
Right.
You wanted to help people, and
Except
you had
that
a great many displaced people. There was no feeling that there were more Jews than somebody else. Like now, it sounds as though there are only Jews that were displaced or harmed. But at that time, there were lots and lots and lots of displaced people, and lots of, you know, you got in. You knew something. You were beginning to know something about the camps. And I had gone into Buchenwald after they sanitized it, and then, I mean, they removed all the bodies, but it wasn't the fact, you didn't realize that this was a Jewish thing. You knew that the Jewish program,
It was
but,
just another group of people.
but it
that
was another
suffered.
group of people, and that was kind of caught up in it. I mean, I think they've a little overdone it at this point. I mean, it's there, and there's no question about it, but I get it asked a lot of times about stamp collecting and so forth, and it's true, I collected stamps like everybody else, but I kind of got interested in it by the occupation stamps while we were in Germany, because all the Allied forces and the German forces had put out special stamps when they occupied a territory to be used in that territory. And there weren't very many of them, so I began to kind of collect them at that time and created an interest in collecting them. I remember in Bamberg, Germany, one German came to me and knew I was interested in stamps and wanted me to go to Switzerland and get a stamp collection that he had sent to Switzerland 5 or 6 years before, trying to get his money out. But I never did that. And that created the interest in the German stamps, which later I collected a lot of Germany and sold in Basel, Switzerland, but that's 10, 15 years, 20 years later. We decided to leave France and come back to the United States, primarily because Teasley was 7 months pregnant, so you had to make some kind of decision. Either you're going to have the child there, or which would have been at the American Hospital in Neuilly, or come home. And both parents, I think, wanted us to come home. And the job at the Office for Liquidation was obviously running down, so I had to figure out what I was going to do for a job, and I decided I didn't want to get in the State Department at that time. So we made the decision to come home. And
Could I say one thing? One thing about our living in Paris. Number one, again, there were no other American women there unless they had been in the service. So that I had no women that I knew except French women. And also because we were a young couple, we were very popular with the people there, the French and the Americans, so that we were really leading a gay life, weren't we?
Yeah, we had some American friends called the Fosters,
Oh, yes.
and they were probably 30 years older than we were,
Oh,
20,
at least.
20, 30 years. But we would bum around the bars and the nightclubs and the sex shows and that
I
kind
remember
of
one.
thing. And they were kind of reliving their life, as I see it now, reliving their life in us. They were sort of introducing us to all of this kind of thing. And it was, age was not a barrier, and nationality was not a barrier. Obviously, being American was
Yeah.
a very, very strong advantage.
And being young.
And being young was an advantage, because and everybody else, all the people in the world were trying to get home some way or other. So a lot of those who are now coming back to France, who were older or had money or whatever. I know Drew tried to get Teasley to model for Bettina, somebody who was with Vogue.
Yes.
Bettina, somebody who was a friend of hers.
But she
never
used
came.
to take me to the fashion shows, the openings by different French designers. It just unbelievable what we got to do.
But anyway, that was, then we came home, and I went to work for American Hospital Supply
Right away?
fairly closely. I had, my father got job interviews, one with the Citibank, I think was the name of it, in New York, or National City Bank in New York. Eugene Black was president of it. He was later president of the World Bank, and that's now become Citicorp.
When did you sell the vacuum cleaners?
Well, that comes a little later. But he suggested that I look at this company that a Foster McGaw was starting, and so I went in and had an interview, and they said, "Yeah, we'll hire you." So I went to work for it, and they were in the old Tinker Toy building in Evanston, Illinois. And Teasley, I guess,
Waited till
Teasley
Kate
waited. She was in
born.
Detroit with her mother and father, and then was the problem of trying to find a place to live, because it was very difficult. Housing was very, very short, and you waited for somebody. You had to find somebody who was leaving. That's almost always the way you got a place. You knew somebody, or somebody said, "Oh, I know, and so-and-so's leaving in such and such time," and you went in and got it. So that the first apartment that we had, and after they were born, was gotten through American Hospital Supply. They knew somebody down.
The first place we lived, dear, was in the attic of your parents' home,
Yeah, we had to go someplace.
and with a brand new baby. And that wasn't too easy.
And where was that?
That was on Wesley Avenue in
In
Evanston,
Evanston.
Illinois, and they had a 3-story, and the 3rd story actually was a maid's flat originally. Did it have a bathroom up
I'm
there?
not sure.
I'm not so sure either.
I don't remember.
But it had, a fairly nice large room and a baby, and I kind of think they were pretty good about leaving us alone.
And your sister was dating Jack Fabian.
Yeah.
And I remember I'd come down in the morning to get the bottle out of the icebox for Cade, and Jack Fabian would just be leaving. So we were in on that romance.
Yeah. We came back to Detroit after we came from overseas, because Cade was about ready to be born, and Teasley was staying, and so was I, staying with her mother and father, but I was going back and forth to Chicago trying to find a job. And Teasley was set with a doctor there to go into the hospital, the local hospital, which I've forgotten the name of it.
Jennings
Memorial Hospital. And it came time for her delivery, and we checked into the hospital, and Teasley's mother was there. The two of us were there checking in, and of course I had to sign and ask my occupation? And I said, unemployed.
And mother
And
really.
Teasley's mother was horrified and didn't really want me to just put, because that was going to go on the birth certificate. So that's what's on the birth certificate, because I was unemployed. And so as soon as Cade was born, very shortly thereafter, I went on back to Chicago, still trying to get a job or do something of that kind. And then as soon as she was able to travel with Cade, we moved into the third floor of my mother and father's house. Again, still trying to look for some apartment. And we finally did find one on Jarvis Street, which
North Chicago.
in north side of Chicago, and it had one bedroom, but it had an enclosed porch. So we were there for 3 years, probably 3 or 4 years.
Until I,
What was your first salary? How much were you being paid when you first got back?
tell it.
I'm not dead sure, but I think $580
It
a
wasn't
month.
that much, I don't think.
I think it was $580 a month, and we were paying about
300 for the apartment.
something. It wasn't that much. I didn't.
Well,
think.
then you weren't making that much
And I
money.
wasn't making. No, maybe I was making $280 a month, and the apartment was $90. I think that's it.
And Dad sent me $50
That's
a
right.
month.
Yeah.
And that was the most wonderful present, because then I could get maybe like a whole roast, and we could eat off of it for several days.
How much did it cost to go out and have dinner and go to a movie for the two of you?
At that time, I don't know, but it was certainly under $10.
We didn't go often. In fact, when we were asked to a cocktail party, we went separately. Either Jack would go first for an hour and then come home, stay with Kate, and then I would go to the, remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, you really couldn't afford a sitter, although sitters were as low as 50 cents an hour, weren't
Yeah.
they, one time rather?
And how much was a car, for example? Roughly.
I really don't remember. The first car that I ever remember we had was that blue Studebaker. And then, so I don't really remember.
But everybody was in the same boat.
Yeah, yeah,
I had friends that lived quite near us, Sally and her husband.
yeah.
And, you know, we were all struggling along.
Hi, this is take 2, and Mother and Dad are in Evanston with Kate. Go ahead, Mother.
When we got to Evanston, we lived on the third floor of Jack's house with his mother and father there. And it was a great place, a nice room. And however, we were eager to get our own place. And we finally got an apartment on the north side of Chicago on Jarvis Street. It had bedroom, living room, and kitchen, dining room combination. Our daughter Kate got the bedroom, and we slept on the hide-a-bed in the living room. And I remember especially one time we had a party, and the guests left, and one of the guests had left his hat. And he came back, and there we were already in the hide-a-bed. But it was a nice little apartment, wasn't it, Jack?
Yes, and I'm trying to remember the time frame, because we had John in that apartment.
Yes.
That's right. But probably before that, some way we went down to Texas, because we did not have John in Texas.
That's right, but I don't remember
So-
keeping the apartment.
Well, I don't either. So I think probably the time frame is that we left from my mother and father's apartment and went to Texas.
That's it.
Went to Texas
That's it.
because I had been assigned to go down there to cover for one of the old-time salesmen in Texas, to cover his territory, and I think he was sick at the time, for several months. And we lived in Arlington, outside of Dallas, and so I was a regular road salesman for American Hospital Supply, leaving Monday morning, getting back probably Friday. over the state of Texas. And there we had a rental house that was, I don't remember the house very much, but it had a nice yard.
Kate having colic, and we would go way out in the yard so we wouldn't have to hear her screaming. And I would take her out walking because I thought babies needed fresh air. And I found out later that I was taking her out at the hottest time of the day, but she didn't seem to mind.
What percentage of couples had just one single income earner at that time?
Oh gosh, my personal feeling, I'd say 80%.
Yeah, at least that.
At least that, maybe
if they
more.
If they were married, usually the wife stayed home.
Yeah.
And that, I've forgotten why I think this salesman did not come back, and they decided they'd put a permanent salesman down there, and they also had decided American Hospital they were going to open up an office, which they did, and they opened up the office in Dallas, and we came on back to Chicago. And I think it was that time that we then found the apartment on Jarvis Street.
I think so.
And then John was born about that time. John was born in Evanston Hospital with a kind of a lengthy labor, as I recall.
Oh, I don't recall that. I do recall that Mother and Dad took Cade back to Detroit, so that when we brought John home from the hospital to our little 3.5 room apartment, he was only baby for a short time, and then they brought Kate back, and John and Kate again had the bedroom. We were back on the hide-a-bed. We very rarely went to the parties at Christmas or something together because it was difficult getting sitters. So Jack would go for an hour and then come home, and then I'd go for an hour. So it was, go ahead.
And David or somebody was asking how much we paid for the apartment, and I'm guessing now, but I guess it was, my salary I think was about $280 a month, and I think we paid about $90 for the apartment. And as Teasley said on the previous tape, our income was supplemented with a check from her father for $50 once a month, which would be a significant portion of the total income.
Did you take out any loans at all at that time to tide you over? I mean, you were renting right now, right? Or did
No,
you
we didn't have any loans at all. The only thing that we did that I recall is we bought on time a washing machine, didn't we?
No, the apartment had them in the basement.
But there was some time that we bought a washing machine, and your mother came over horrified.
Oh, that was
that
yes.
we bought it on time and went down and paid it off.
That was when we were.
I don't know when it was, but you just didn't buy things on time and so forth.
Just for the audience out there, which is a mixture of generations, buying on time would be the equivalent of a credit card, maybe today.
Yeah, but no,
you didn't have credit cards back
it was kind of like a credit card. You bought it from the store, and then you had monthly payments, but you don't necessarily have on a credit card. But if you bought
I
it,
thought it was sort of fun in a way. But as Jack said, Mother was horrified that we were buying something on time.
Did a lot of people back then buy on time, or
no? Usually, you might buy on time for some necessity. But I don't think anybody bought any luxuries on time. You either had the money or you didn't. You didn't do it.
That's a big difference compared to today.
You didn't do it. No, there were no credit cards, and you didn't think in terms of credit. You saved your money. If you wanted something, you usually saved your money and then went down and bought it.
And then was that after that we bought the house on Milburn?
No, I don't believe so. I think I was at American Hospital Supply, among other things, including warehouse work and so forth. I was in the so-called contract department, and American had come up with the idea that they could go into a new hospital that was building, and at that time a lot of money was being poured into hospitals under something called the Hill-Burton Act to build 50 to 100 bed community hospitals all around the country. Later they used the money for other things too. And we thought, well, maybe if we go in and they've got that hospital built, we could go in and say, we'll equip the whole thing, including all the furniture as well as the medical equipment, and do that on a cost-plus basis. That had been done in the furniture business before, but had never been done in the hospital. So I was in that department, and they decided they would expand this enterprise to Atlanta. And they said, sent me down to Atlanta to introduce to that Southeast Territory this system, because small hospitals were being built all over the country in various communities. And that's how we got to Atlanta.
What skills that you learned in the military and habits transferred well and you used in your business life or your professional life?
I'm not aware of any that I know of. Military was an entirely different kind of thing. I mean, I don't.
What habits or disciplines and whatnot that you have that you developed and it worked, made you successful?
I don't know. You have
No,
an answer?
no, sir.
I don't ever think about those things. I mean, I get asked, particularly by you, what about this motivation? What about that motivation? And how about goals and so forth? I'm not all that aware of. Well, you look to the future, but you didn't get into all the political arguments and the philosophical arguments that everybody wants to get in today. This business of I got to find myself, or I've got to wait to do something. Nobody did much of that.
You just got on with the job at hand.
Yeah, you did whatever. As with everything in life, you do what happens to come to you. There aren't a whole lot of people, I don't think, that are that disciplined that they guide what they do throughout life. Most of it is you learn to handle a particular situation that presents itself that day. And granted, you may use your background and your experience and so forth to handle it, but I think that's the way most people operate, and not very many, unless they're highly disciplined, have long-term goals and ambitions, although the books all say you're supposed to do it that way.
So back to history. Right now you have 2 children, and you are. When did you first buy your first home?
In Atlanta.
In Atlanta.
And of course, moving to Atlanta was great because my aunt and grandmother lived in Atlanta, and they were thrilled to have us there. And we did much with them, and they enjoyed having the children there. I didn't do any outside things in Atlanta. They were like 6 months and almost 2, so I was busy with them. But we loved our house, and we were there how long? 2 years? Or a year and a half about?
Well, at least 2 years, I would think.
Not any more than that, though.
And everybody's interested in economics. The house that we had was on a lot that was probably 90 to 100 feet and probably about 300 foot depth, and fell off into a wooded area, and the whole area was wooded, on a very nice street in an excellent neighborhood in Atlanta, and we paid, I think, $12,500 for it, and I probably had 3 bedrooms.
It had 3 bedrooms, one that we didn't use because it wasn't heated, and we used it as a little extra room. But it was a very nice house.
And
the
I've forgotten
children
where.
again slept together in 1 bedroom.
I've forgotten how much, where we got the money, but in all probability we borrowed that money. You're talking about borrowing. And when we left Atlanta to go back to Chicago, in another job. I was out because I did a lot of traveling, and somebody came by to try to buy, that was interested in buying the house, and the price was $13,000, I think, which we
Yes.
thought was pretty good because we'd made money on the house rather than lose money. Up till that time, you generally figured that when you bought a house, because it was being used and worn while you were there, you would not be able to sell it for what you paid for it. But if you could sell it for only, say, 10% less, that was pretty good because it cost you 10% to live in it, and that's less than the rent. And we sold it for $500
But it was
more.
interesting that Jack was not in town when a man knocked at the door and said he was interested in the house, and not with a realtor. So we had a lawyer friend down the block. So I said, well, wait just a minute, and I ran down and got him to come back with me because I didn't know exactly what to do. But we did sell it without the realtors, I remember, didn't we, Jack?
What year was this about?
Oh, it was about 49 or 50.
Yeah.
No, it was
John,
50, 51 or 2
yeah,
because,
John was born in 49.
yeah.
51, 52, something like that.
So after Atlanta,
We came back to Chicago, and I've really kind of forgotten what job I had when I came back to Chicago with American, but American headquarters were still in Evanston, and we found
A nice house.
a nice house to buy.
No, I think
Rent.
we just rented
We
it
rented that too.
on Milburn Street in Evanston, and it had a lot more room than we had. Each child had his own bedroom, and it was while we were there that Kate started kindergarten not too far from our house, and there were a lot of good years there. At that time they'd gotten older, and I worked at the aphasia clinic at Northwestern for the junior league, which was a fascinating job.
what was
And
the aphasia clinic?
that's when children can't talk, but they have the mental capability, and technicians would work with them to try to get them to get their language.
So they were
stuff.
mute.
Pardon me?
They were mute.
Almost, yeah.
Interesting. And let's see. So Kate and John were going to what schools?
Well, just Cade was at Orrington School in Evanston, and John was there for a short time, and he was very unhappy at first because Cade would come home saying how wonderful school was, and John didn't think it was that red hot, but we loved it there. It was.
Did you take any trips, family trips at that point? Were they old enough?
Yes, my Aunt Kate came once and stayed with them, and we went to Holland.
That was the first overseas trip we took, was to Holland. Yes.
Yes,
That was in
and
'55.
left the children with her. Yeah.
And on that trip, we went KLM, and I remember this is 1955, and the seats on KLM were like lawn chairs. They were sort of sling cloth seats, and the baggage, I guess the baggage was overhead in nets. And I remember the stewardess coming down the hall, down the thing, in a dirty smock, and I mean, kind of food spattered all over every place. So that flying at that time was just beginning to get back from wartime flying. After all, the war had only been over maybe 8, 9, 10 years, and Europe wasn't getting back into position yet. But that was the first flight, and it was with one of the major airlines.
I remember looking across the aisle in the night and seeing the pilot sitting there, which was a little disconcerting. Do you remember that, Jack?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And at that time we went, I think we took a quick trip back to Paris just
I
to
believe
take a
so.
look at it.
Yes, we did, because I remember trying to find our favorite nightclub, Monsignor, and it wasn't there.
Right. Monsignor was a nightclub run by White Russians that was active during the Germans' occupation, and they just, when the Americans and the French came in, they just picked up and just changed their clientele, but didn't change their
But
act
we enjoyed that
at all. Yeah, when
when
we
we
were
lived there.
yeah, and when we lived there, and I don't know whether the place is still there or not.
No, we looked for it. It isn't.
Were you coming up to White Lake at all then? At that time?
Oh, yeah.
Every summer? Or?
For a short visit. We didn't stay when you all were babies. But
Dad, when you were working, did you have time, say, at night when you came home to read to the kids, or on weekends find yourself you had time to spend time with Kate and John?
I didn't have. I was not with the children nearly as much as Teasley was, and we didn't. I don't think either one of us went by what all the books were telling you to do, how to raise children, because even at that time they had theories on raising children. Dr. Spock was the big one
I
then.
never read Spock.
And but I don't know. We never did anything sort of by the book.
We got sitters quite often. That I went to an employment agency and got my sitters for a while. But
I guess we never let the children hold us. If we wanted to do something, we didn't say, well, we can't do it because we have children. We'd just go ahead and get sitters or something else. So in that case, you might have been considered selfish. We did a lot of things with the children, and we took them traveling when they got older, but we didn't let them. We didn't restrict ourselves because of the children.
Did you get any help at home as far as cleaning was concerned?
yes, while on Milburn Avenue, I got a wonderful colored woman who was with us even into our next move. And she was marvelous. That was once a week. She came and cleaned. She didn't babysit, she just cleaned.
Yeah, that was common. Most everybody had somebody who came in and cleaned, and some of them had live-in people, and that was much more common. Now cleaning a house is kind of a business. People have it run it as a team and so forth. And you also became usually pretty close to the person who was doing cleaning, or if they were a live-in cook, of course, even more so.
We never had a live-in help, however. But then we moved. Did you want to go on? Our next move
Sure.
was to, where was it?
McDaniel?
No, it wasn't Ivy. No, not Ivy. Oh, gosh.
Ivy.
Milburn.
No. McDaniel first.
Oh, well, I never lived on McDaniel, but I did live on Milburn, which was next to McDaniel.
Okay. Well,
And we had a great house there.
but before we moved to Milburn, we had a house on, when I think the name was McDaniel, which was north of the Milburn house. It was just off Skokie Road, and it had an extra room up over the garage, a bedroom up over the garage.
That's where we brought David home.
David was
Oh.
in the picture at that time, but I think that's the next house we moved into.
Okay, but I question the address. I can prove
Well,
it later.
Okay.
Yeah, it may not be. It may not be.
Anyway,
That's right.
John and Cade, by then, Cade was in junior high, and or the last year of this Lincoln school, not Lincoln, what was it? What was our school's name?
Lincoln.
Lincoln Wood.
Lincolnwood was where I went.
Lincolnwood.
Lincolnwood.
And John was starting then, about in second grade. And I remember going to a teacher's conference, and they're saying, "Your son John is disrupting the whole class." That's funny. And then David was born, and we brought him back to that house. But meantime, we were there quite a while, weren't we, on Milbert?
Yeah, but but on this other house that we were in a house on somewhere. It was off of Skokie Avenue, off of Skokie, and I thought it was on McDaniel, but it was in this house that we had a New Year's Eve party, in which we had each room was put over to gambling in each room, which was a great success. And I had brought home a book on how to do surgery. It was called Understanding Surgery, but we said do-it-yourself surgery, and that was down in the basement. So Sandy Stewart, while everybody was upstairs reveling, set up a dummy of cloth on the work table down there and put a lot of my surgical instruments in it and propped up the book on how to do surgery yourself. That wasn't the name of the book, but that was what we called
had a wonderful recreation room down in the basement with a fireplace, and we used that a lot too.
Yeah, that was a
nice house.
That was a nice house, and the walk to Lincolnwood School, John would walk there, and sometime in there, the next door neighbor said they wanted John to come over and play with a relative that was coming. Well, the relative turned out to be Dwight Eisenhower's grandson,
David.
who was also named David. Yeah. And
they had
never saw him again after that.
They had the Secret Service men standing by while these two boys played.
What were your hobbies at that time? I know you had a love of jazz and stamp collecting, and Mother had her activities. What were you doing besides socializing, having your parties and friends over on your free time?
Well, we were getting into boating at that time, and of course we'd come up to White Lake and do sailing. And so for my 40th birthday, whatever year that was, that'd be 1960, Teasley gave me a sunfish kit. The sunfish was made out of plywood at that time, and it didn't have the scooped out cockpit that it has now. It's just a flat top thick. So all that winter in the garage, we built the sunfish, which we had for a long time, and I don't know where it ever went to.
No, I don't either.
It's out of wood.
Did you have time to race any other boats or crew on any other boats?
Well, all that we did was up here at White Lake. I never joined the Shared and Shore Yacht Club, where my father had raced stars most of his life, and we did no boating except down on the beach. Well, I can remember taking the sunfish down when there was a lot of wind and waves were blowing, and going out and then coming in and run it up on the beach, but not really in Evanston.
Were you both playing golf at that time?
Oh,
No.
When did you start playing golf?
Oh, gosh.
Much later. Okay.
Well, I started. That's right. I did start with Shirley Vanneman, and we played at the public course along the Evanston Canal.
Canal Shores.
And Connie McCulloch played with us, and then we also joined a women's group at the Wilmette Golf Course and played once a week. I'd forgotten. I played quite a bit in those days. And I still had different volunteer jobs. I worked for the Visiting Nurse Association, and I did a whole lot of other things, school stuff. But
And
no paying employment yet.
And then we moved from the quote-unquote McDaniel house to a house that we had bought, that we paid, I know how much we paid that for that, $95,000, and that was on Milburn, and right across the street from Lincolnwood School, and it was almost a mansion kind of a house. It had a third floor, and it had a powder room and a big living room, and 3 bedrooms on the second floor and 2 on the third,
When
and
did
an
you
attic.
move to Bennett?
Bennett, this is Bennett.
Not you said Milburn.
I'm sorry, it's Bennett. Bennett we're talking about. Milburn was a long time. Bennett. Bennett, Bennett, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And we bought that from somebody named Pope, I bought it directly from them. We're
Basically, your
moving on.
memory went once you started to have children, I think.
Yeah,
Yes, I think so.
but on Bennett, and that was really an upscale Evanston house, and I mentioned the $90,000 because we sold that later I'll just finish up, when we moved to Japan for something like, no, I'm sorry, we bought it for $55,000.
Okay.
We sold it a couple of years later when we moved to Japan for $90,000, and I put the money in the stock market, and when I came back, the money was worth half as much, and the price of the house had doubled up to $180,000, which is...
Before we moved into this grand house, I went into the Georgian Hotel with my new baby David, because Jack didn't want me to have to do any moving of stuff with a brand new baby. And I was supposed to stay there for 2 or 3 days. Well, after the first night, I called and said, "Come get me." So we put you on the little porch off of our bedroom there, and so we could hear you in the night. And
How old were both of you when you had Cade, John, and then me?
well, with Cade, I was 23. What was I, Jack?
Well, 1922 from 47 is 25.
Okay, my mistake. I was 25.
Well.
And then 2 years later, according to Jack, I was 27 when I had John. And then I was going on. I had David in September, and in December I was 40. So it was just before I was 40 that I had David.
Did you really want another child?
Oh, I'll say. Oh, I finally decided, since we didn't have any more children, that both of us must be sterile. But thankfully we had you.
You were on Bennett for how long?
Well, roughly probably 10 years, I guess. I don't know exactly.
Almost 12,
12,
because
okay,
he had
12.
his 12th birthday on the plane going to Japan.
Okay.
And during the time on Bennett, you had some very close friends that you did some traveling with.
Yes.
And who were those friends, and what were your travels?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, the Bells, Don and Catherine Bell,
They
and
went on one trip with us.
and the Sandersons, Bobby and Sandy Sanderson, and the McCullochs, Hugh and Connie McCulloch, and we traveled with them, the McCullochs and the Sandersons probably the most, and then the McCullochs next most, and but we all traveled together also.
One trip we all went to Africa,
Yeah.
and Donald Bell is the one that really put that trip together. It was quite glamorous because there were 6 of us and we had 2 planes, and small, naturally. So instead of going from one game preserve to another by car, we flew, and it was really, wasn't it fun, Jack?
Yeah, that would be a highlight of the various trips. And Another trip that we took with the Sandersons and the McCullochs was on our 25th anniversary. The McCullochs' anniversary was not the same day, but the day either before or after. And we flew to Denmark, where Ole Lippmann, who was a good friend that we knew from American Hospital Supply, entertained us royally. And we then went from there down to Rijeka, and by train, and made it, which we've always laughed about, a switch of trains in Zindani Most, which is a town in Upper Yugoslavia now. And then rented a drive yourself, I think, didn't we?
Oh, we had a driver.
We had a driver with a Volkswagen who drove us down the Adriatic coast to Dubrovnik, past Split to Dubrovnik. And at that point, I think it was this trip, we split. And Teasley and I went to,
We all met in Paris.
well, anyway, we all met in Paris and then came home. So that was one of the various trips. But we had been on several trips, some of which I kind of forgot about.
A lot.
Jen, how much vacation time were you able to take off from work at that time? It sounded like you were able to take off quite a bit.
Well, when I look back on it, I don't really understand how I got so
I
much
don't
time
either.
off, frankly, because these trips that we took, and then we went to New Zealand and Australia again with the same group, and those were 2-week trips, and at least, and maybe 3-week trips. And then I also remember coming up to White Lake on weekends, and what I would do would leave Thursday night and not come back until early Monday morning on the plane, because the plane would leave about 6 o'clock and get over here about 8. And when it came back, the plane left here at 8, and because of the time change, got to Chicago at 8. And I didn't take any summer vacation. I took the 1 day each time. So that as I look back on it, I'm kind of surprised that I got as much as I did.
Yes, dear.
Oh, wait.
Well, on work history, I frankly have kind of foggy about the work history. I'm not one who looks back. I don't know very many people in American Hospital anymore, but there are a lot of them who hold reunions and all that kind of stuff. And I guess it comes from a kind of general philosophy that you ought to live your life in segments, and whatever you do it, and live for that particular time, and then when you're through with it, forget about it. Don't try to live it as a past or go back or even reminisce about it for that matter. Just do the next thing that comes along. And of course, as you get older, you can't do as many things, but then you just don't worry about that either. You just do as much as you can and don't apologize for it. The work thing, a work day, usually I would try to go to work an hour or so before the office opened up, particularly as I got further along and was in charge of things. Because typically I can get, and everybody has a clock of their own, but I can get almost 70% of productive work for me comes before noon, and probably the rest of it is afternoons. And I never worked at night. I rarely brought things home to work. I would rather go in early in the morning and do it if I had to do that kind of stuff. With American Hospital Supply, they bought a company called V. Mueller, which was a surgical instrument company, and that had a whole structure in place. They bought it from the owner, and the owner's son was the president of it, and so, but the American wanted something in it, and they were very weak in sales. They were good in technology, but very weak in sales. So they sent me down there to be sales manager and to take the place of a guy who was the sales manager down there. So I started out as the assistant sales manager. And their sales management people had never traveled with their salesmen, which to anybody in American Hospital Supply was very strange, because you always had even your top people out in front of your customers. But in this company, that never happened. The salesman had never seen the sales manager in the field in front of any of his customers. So I started out doing that, and so spent the first 2-3 months never in the office but out. So then that gave me some power when I came back and wanted to push something. I could say, yeah, but your customers and your salesmen say this. So that gave you some strength other than just American Hospital Supply.
In fact, he traveled so much that I remember your saying after he'd been gone about 4 days, finally the 4th day we sat down to dinner and you'd say, "Where's Daddy?" But he was gone an awful lot.
But in following that, I found it was a good technique when you were trying to argue something to management or something, is that it wasn't your idea, but it was your customer's idea. It may be your idea, but if you'd been out in front of the customer and they hadn't, they had absolutely no reply for you whatsoever.
I know I'm still trying to pull this out of you, but sorry for keep pounding away. But the strengths that you found that you had that might have helped you in business, were you a very good planner or delegator, listener, negotiator? What would you say you felt were some strengths that you had?
I don't know. I probably negotiation, because they threw me into a lot of particularly overseas stuff when I got involved overseas. Almost everything I did was negotiating contracts, which in essence is selling.
I know when I talked to Frank Nakamoto one-on-one, who you worked with in Japan, the one comment he made about you is that you were a tremendous planner. You seemed to think far in advance, and he was impressed by your planning ability.
Well, I still get accused of that, and you know, I like to go through the what ifs. I mean, what if such and such happened? What would you do? So that you have about 8 scenarios that maybe could happen, and some of them obviously are not going to happen. And that, I think, forces you then to give the impression that you planned ahead, because you all of a sudden the situation does come up. And I even do that at Plymouth Harbor. They used to kid me. You know, you come up with all these things that might happen, and you know, like at Plymouth Harbor, what are they going to do when 2 same-sex couple who aren't married come in and apply for a job? And I said, well, it's going to happen, you know, so you better plan for it.
So, what led to your position over in Japan, and what was that experience like, the move over and also living and working in Japan?
Well, I don't think we probably would have taken this job if it hadn't been for David. And we thought what a wonderful opportunity it would be for this young 12-year-old. And it turned out to be just that. And you enjoyed your job too there, didn't you, Jack?
Yeah, you get differences of opinion. I never considered David's position in this, frankly, at all. No, it's just a difference of opinion. That's how life is. It was a job and an opportunity, and because I'd done a lot of stuff overseas, it was, as I'm saying, it was a change in your lifestyle, and I've always been interested in that. Anything that changes what I'm doing, so I'm no longer responsible for what I did, because we'll start something else. So as far as I was concerned, that was probably the major thing. Plus the fact that the 2 children were grown up, so we didn't have that problem of bringing teenagers over there. Well, of course, 12 isn't a teenager. But if you had somebody that was 17, 18 years old and you had to move them, that would be a difficult thing to do to Japan.
Weren't you head of international at that point? And weren't you taking a step down at all in your position in the company when you moved over, or was it a step
Were you
up?
head of international?
No. I was not head of international. I was head of the contract section of international. And later I became president. Somebody said I was president of international. Well, I wasn't president of international. I was president of a corporation that they formed to do business overseas in a certain fashion. But I was never an officer per se of American Hospital Supply. I was president of divisions of American. I was president of V. Mueller, and I was president of ASECO, which is the American Hospital Export Corporation. But those were not corporate offices. They were divisional offices. And when we went, so I was president of ASECO, which was this, but the company wasn't that large a company and wasn't that significant in the corporate overall thing. So that the move to Japan I considered an opportunity. Plus the fact that it was a change in atmosphere.
We've heard quite a bit from Dad just now, and I wanted to go back to Mother and get her comments about raising her kids. So, Mother.
Well, having grown up in Evanston myself, I had many friends, and we had many married friends with children the same age. So you had a certain support in discussing with your friends about different things that were happening. I don't remember any crises with Kate or John. We had worrying days when Kate started dating, but that's typical of any couple with teenage children. John was never any particular problem. We sent him away to school when he was, how old was he when he went to
I don't know the age, but he had finished sophomore year in
high school, and we didn't feel that he was getting all the academic help he should have. So we sent him to, where'd we send him?
Hotchkiss.
Lawrenceville.
No,
Hotchkiss.
Hotchkiss,
Hotchkiss. Yeah.
which he seemed to enjoy. And he joined the Glee Club there. One funny story, and the Glee Club traveled to a neighboring city, and they had one law at Hotchkiss that you were not to ride in any student's car or off the campus. And one of his friends lived in the city that they sang in, and so he was riding in the car and was caught. And when he got back to school, he was at a convocation of some kind, and he'd had a beer and happened to sit next to a proctor who smelled it, and that was it. We got a telephone call that he was on his way home, and of all the dejected boys that came back to Evanston, Hotchkiss was nice enough to say that if he would go back to Evanston High and finish the rest of that year, and if he made good grades, and if he wanted to, they would take him back. And we gave him that option. He did go back to Evanston. He did make good grades. And we said, John, you don't have to go back to Hotchkiss unless you really want to. And he said he did. Right, Jack? You want to add to that?
Well, I can't really add to it. He just said he did, and he went back and finished.
Yeah.
How about Kate? She stayed in Evanston and went to Evanston
yes.
High.
Kate was a go-getter from day one. And she ended up being the first girl president of her hall at Evanston High School. And each hall had how many thousand, do you remember?
Probably 1,000, because I think the
There were
school had
5,
probably had 3,000 all told in the school.
And I remember when she ran for office and everything, and it was quite exciting. She excelled at almost anything she tried.
Just going back, when we were growing up, when we were little, did you read to us when we were very young?
Oh, sure.
Like every night, didn't you?
Oh,
I know with me,
did not. I didn't have time to read to you.
I know with me, you said you could stay up later if you
Yeah,
continued to
if
read.
you read.
Do you do that with the other children too?
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah, there was a rule that they could stay, that they had to go to bed at a certain time, but if they wanted to read for
Half
even an
hour.
hour or half hour, then they could stay up. But if they didn't want to read, then they had to go to bed then.
But they always had a bedtime, and it was kept, and everything just worked fine.
Jumping back to Japan, tell us about your experiences living in Japan, living and working in Japan. Mother?
Oh, it was very interesting. We had a nice house in Akasaka. Of course, I had very few friends. We did belong to the American Club there, where we had friends, and then we belonged to a marvelous church, and I guess most of my friends were from St. Albans Church. And I was active. I was head of the rummage sale at St. Albans once, and I didn't help out in a school in Japan. I did in the other countries we went to later. But, well, I had you, and I kept busy.
How about you, Dan? What was your impressions, not at work, but also about the experience living in Japan, the culture, the differences?
Well, the job was a joint venture with a company called Toyo Rayon, but I guess more familiarly known as Toray, and they were a chemical company in fabrics and plastics, mostly. In fact, they had the franchise for DuPont's nylon, which really got them on their feet, and they wanted to diversify in the hospital supply field. And so they made a joint venture, which was 51% Toray and 49% American Hospital Supply. But American Hospital would have the chief executive officer of the company, for which I was it. So I've often said it was a joint venture in which it was me and 40 Japanese, because everybody else in the company was Japanese. Later, we brought over somebody from the United States, but there were never any more than at least 2 people. And it was all under a corporate setup, an American Hospital corporate setup that had a guy named Frank Nakamoto heading it up, and that was wholly owned by American Hospital Supply. You get...
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mother.
Well, I was going to tell 2 interesting things that I did while there. Through the American Women's Club of Tokyo, I was sent to, what was the name of that city, way outside, by train, to teach American English teachers that were teaching English. And went with another girl, and it was quite far out of town, and we stayed in a Japanese house with a couple other teachers, and that was a very exciting experience. And cut, because I can't remember something.
Well, on the business side of it, we were doing only marketing in the beginning, and therefore you had a sales force. And since I'd really done the same thing at V. Mueller, you come down as a stranger and trying to ingratiate yourself. I figured I would go out in the field as the chief executive officer with the Japanese salesman, and I didn't realize the consternation that this caused, because Japanese executives didn't travel with their salesmen, and the salesmen were used to traveling on the least amount of money they could, and they would stay at railroad hotels, which were really nothing much more than a box, and they didn't feel that I'd be beneath my dignity to stay in that same place. But I finally convinced them that I could do that. But then probably the greatest consternation is what they were going to do with me at breakfast, because they knew that Americans always ate ham and eggs. And of course, they were talking about seaweed and pickles and things like that for breakfast. But I insisted I was going to have the same breakfast. So I think that probably caused more consternation on how they were going to handle me than almost any other thing.
How successful was the joint venture?
Joint venture in the long run really was not all that successful. It was very difficult. We were bringing products in that were manufactured outside of Japan, and that meant competition, so you had a great deal of difficulty getting the approval to bring them in, and there were all kinds of blockages that the Japanese brought up. We were trying to introduce rubber gloves, surgical gloves, syringes and needles, and then we were going to bring in and then make IV solutions. It was a competitive market, and just about that time the oil crises came, and surgical gloves are made with, syringes particularly are made with plastics that are petroleum based, so that it became rather difficult. And after 2 or 3 years, there had to be something to be done. They either had to amalgamate the joint venture or bring it into Toray or do something. So they took parts of it out and put it into the American Hospital Supply area, and Toray took the rest of it over, and so I came home. So it really was not that successful.
While we were there, I offered again through the American Women's Club to teach English to anyone who might be interested. And there were 2 businessmen who signed up to come to our house once a week for English lessons, and conversational English. And I remember if Jack were home, he'd never stay. He'd go on upstairs and leave me with the 2 gentlemen. But we had a marvelous time, and they showed us pictures of their kids and home, and it was a very exciting experience. To do quite a bit of traveling around Japan. One of the highlights was when we climbed Mount Fuji, and I remember we started, I think, at the 5th station and climbed up to where we spent the night, not at the summit. And it was in a dormitory type building, and the men slept on one tier and the women slept on the other. And we got up at dawn or before dawn and went the rest of the way so we could see the sunrise. And it was a very exciting experience. Plus we got around to several other places in Japan. And you asked about the people. They were most courteous, and I had a woman who came and helped me, and we became fast friends. I don't think they make friends easily with gaijins, as they called foreigners, and we never were invited into a Japanese home except for Frank Nakamoto's, who worked with Jack, and we did ask them, Mrs. Nakamoto and Frank, to come to our house once, and she was quite nervous because she spoke no English. But we got on the subject of a Japanese massage, and her face lit up, and pretty soon we were down on the floor, and she was massaging us, and it loosened things up considerably.
Yeah, she was interested in shiatsu.
Yes,
which
that
is the
was
pressure point kind of thing. I had always thought that, and I guess I still think that that people spend too much time in the differences in the cultures and how do you get along in business with other people of a different culture and so forth. And and there's usually a common bond, and once you can break through the mistrust and the misconceptions that these people have and that you have of them, you find out that people in general have the same motivations and desires and so forth.
Well, like our sensei, we had a teacher that came to teach us Japanese, and we tried very hard, and she you could see her just suppressing her laughter because we were so poor at it. And I remember at the last, before we stopped, we took her out to dinner, remember, and we laughed over the whole experience. It was fun.
But even just things, I mean, they write books on the facts that the Americans shake hands and the Japanese bow. And I remember one time going into some corporate headquarters, and of course all the secretaries and the tea girls are bowing to me, and so I'm bowing back. And Frank Nakamoto finally got me aside and just said, Jack, just stop bowing. First of all, you don't bow up there, and secondly, you don't do it right anyway. So, and thirdly, they don't expect you to bow, so why don't you just stop it? So that was probably pretty good advice. If you just use your own common courtesies, everybody else gets along. You don't have to mimic everybody. Like when you went to the Middle East and they said you never showed the sole of your left foot or something like that. Well, that's really kind of ridiculous.
So you closed up shop in Japan and came back to the States. Was that difficult for you, Dad, to come back to, after being away for almost 2 years from American Hospital Supply America? Was that difficult for you to make that return?
Well, in retrospect, yes. And I think in one of questions that Kate had put to you was, what were you consider your greatest success in business and what do you consider your greatest failures? And I hadn't really thought about it, and I certainly haven't dwelled on it necessarily, but I guess the greatest failure was the inability to insert myself back into the corporate life of American Hospital Supply after having been overseas. Nowadays, lots of people go overseas and come back so that the corporations are used to it and the people are. But at that time, I came back and I have a certain rank, not top rank, but a high rank, and there just wasn't any place to fit me in necessarily, and I did kind of recognize this. So the reason for leaving American Hospital Supply, really in retrospect, that's kind of what happened. I kiddingly say that I was half fired and I half resigned and I half retired, and I suppose that's probably pretty true. Actually, and technically, I retired and I got a party send off and so forth and so on. But it was really basically because it was not, either I wasn't able to fit in or the corporation wasn't able to fit me back into it.
Was that when we went to, we came back and lived in Chicago?
At that time when we came back from Japan, we had furniture in Japan that had been shipped over there, as a matter of fact, in a container on a ship, and it was about 2 bedrooms and a living room and a dining room worth of furniture. So we had automatically been cut down to where you were highly mobile, because if you have that, you can live most any place. And we fortunately found, again on a fluke, all our living things have been kind of on flukes, a place in Chicago at 260 East Chestnut, on the 48th floor of a building there. And
I don't remember just how we happened to retire to Florida. However, we did visit our good friends the Sandersons with David. Was it after we got back from Japan?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we liked their setup so, and we decided, well, let's try it. So we wanted to rent an apartment for the following winter. And we got one at Pelican Cove, just down the street from the Sandersons, for the following winter. We also bought a sailboat and a trailer, and we bought a car to pull the sailboat back to. Where'd we pull it back to?
Well, we were living in White Lake at that time. That was our residence in Michigan.
Oh, well, we were pulling it back to. Yeah, right. Okay, go ahead.
And we had given up the apartment there and moved to Michigan and made that our residence. So now we were thinking about a move to Florida, and eventually we did move to Florida and changed our residence to Florida, so that became the full-time place rather than White Lake.
But in the meantime, David was away at school, first at
Andover.
and then Lawrenceville, and he would come on vacations, which was good.
Yeah, and but at this time we were really transferring and living full-time in Florida, so then we tried to buy the apartment that we were renting, and they didn't want to sell it, so we bought one next door, which you were involved in because you looked in the newspaper or something.
Sailboat water.
Sailboat water. So we bought that apartment, which was on Gulf of Mexico. Well, it was on the bay, not on the Gulf. Gulf of Mexico Drive. What was it? 4140, something like that. It was Mark 1.
Mark, right.
With the Sandersons just down the road.
Just down the road. And of course, that's been a long time friendship, so we were delighted to have them so close. And we had a lot of fun with them, and we enjoyed Florida. This was in 1976. And
What were some of your best boat trips that you took on that sailboat? Where did you usually go?
Well, the sailboat that we bought was a 24-foot called a Ranger, and you could sleep on it, but it would just be overnights.
you didn't like it, did you?
Never liked the boat. The worst boat I ever had. Well, it was very badly designed so that when the wind blew, the boat headed up into the wind.
Wasn't that the Lancer?
Maybe it was called a Lancer. I guess it was called a Lancer. But it headed up the wind even if you had the main luffing and the jib full.
Right.
So
yeah.
The hull design was bad. That's why as it healed, it just...
But we took it, brought it back to White Lake.
We brought it back to White Lake, and we used it here, and we had a trailer for it, and then we brought it back down there again. And then we traded that boat in for... And I got the full, in a trade-in, I got the full price that I'd paid for it, for the Island Packet.
But it was new.
Which was brand new and was one of the very early Island Packets. It was called a 29-foot. And it had a bowsprit on it, and later when they advertised it as a 31, but all they did was include the bowsprit.
A little more.
But that was a centerboard boat, and that was a cruising boat. And it was one of the early Island Packets, which has now become one of the very popular kind of boats, cruising boats down there.
Where'd we go on it? Didn't we go down to the Keys?
Yeah, we went as far as the Keys on it. We went with the South, what was it? The
SCYC.
SCYC.
Sarasota. Yeah. What was
Coastal?
SC?
No, Sarasota, yeah. SC. Sun Coast Yacht Club.
Yeah,
Sun Coast Yacht Club, which didn't have a yacht club, but but it was very active and only for sailing boats, and they had weekend. You could just meet for the weekend and go some place close by, and then they had week or 2 week trips in which you went as a group down to the Everglades and then further on down to the Keys, down to Marathon.
You had other long-time friends that were living down there also. That
Well, we met a lot of new people through SCYC, And not so many long-time friends were in this organization.
But in Sarasota, in
Oh, yeah.
Florida, that
Yeah.
was one of the attractions of being
Yes.
down there. Besides the Sandersons, who else lives down there from way back?
There really wasn't anybody.
Sears?
There really wasn't
Sears?
anybody.
Okay.
No, there weren't. We
But of
didn't-
course
That's
now,
Now they've come down.
well, we've been there for 27 years,
Right.
so it's a long time.
Right.
Well,
Friends.
there's still, well, yeah, they're starting to come down now from White Lake, but
Mhm.
most of the people that we knew and even know now were people that we did not know when we went to Longboat Key. I don't know of anybody other than the Kaisers
Kaisers, I was
Yeah.
lived
thinking
down
of,
there,
yeah.
and then there are others. The Knights have moved
Knights
down
also,
and so
yeah.
forth, but they kind of came along. Kaisers were really the only other one. Knights came a little later.
And activity-wise, besides the boat, what other activities did you get involved with? When did you start with your overseas assignments with IESC, International Executive Service Corps?
I don't remember the.
Well, it's after we
Specific date.
moved to Mariners Cove, wasn't it?
No, it was before that. I
Oh,
think it
that's
was
right, we did.
Well, the first
Went to
one we
Jordan.
had, we had signed up with as after retiring with an organization called the International Executive Service Corps, and they called us and said that they had a request for somebody to help with a syringe company in Jordan, and would we do it? And we said, yeah, we would, but I didn't know anything about syringes, frankly. So I went to the West Coast and got a hold of, I've forgotten his name now, but he worked for me as a salesman and sales manager.
May I interrupt and just explain what the International Executive Service Corps is?
Yep.
What is that organization?
Well, it's an organization that was formed just about the time Kennedy formed the Peace Corps, and Kennedy formed the Peace Corps, and then David Rockefeller decided that maybe they could form a similar thing that would be for retired executives to go overseas and work for a short time, that being a couple of months, with private enterprises in the so-called underdeveloped countries, and that they could bring the expertise that they had and maybe help those companies become competitive. So it was kind of a combination of assisted help over there and the Peace Corps kind of a deal. But it came out of that. It was the same era.
So, Mother, what was Jordan like?
Oh, wonderful. We stayed in a hotel, and I got a job as a teacher's assistant in the American school. And the American school had many diplomat children and some Jordan, not many Jordan pupils. And I helped in a English class, and it was a lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
In Jordan, you took various trips to see archaeology sites, etc.
I worked for Save the Children organization. And at that time, one of their projects was to go out into the Bedouin countryside and where they were weaving rugs. And of course, the Bedouin women have been weaving rugs for centuries. But we introduced new dyes, which they were not able to get. And so we had a professional who went with us, and we'd go to these camps where they were weaving rugs right on the ground. And it was a very exciting experience. One interesting thing was that the men who were number one in the household were letting their women do this, and the women were making money for the first time in their lives, and the men were letting them keep it. And we'd go from one village to another doing this, and I was fortunate enough to purchase 3 of the rugs that I saw being woven, and we were wondering how we could get them back to the States. Well, Queen Nor, this was a project of hers, and so she had organized having a big show in Washington, D.C. of these Jordanian rugs. So they said they'd take our rugs in the shipment.
That's
And when
exciting.
we got back, we went to the show, and I must say it's the first time I met Queen Nor was in Washington, D.C. But it was a very exciting experience. Yes.
And Queen Nor, again, she was American.
Yes, she
Originally,
married.
for people who don't know.
Yes. Oh, yes. She was American. She's still living there too.
Did you help out the businesses there in Jordan? Was that a successful venture on your side, Dad? Or
Well, I think it probably was. Their primary problem was they couldn't sell the syringes they were manufacturing, and that and I kind of knew that was going to be the job before I went over there. So we had to figure out how to do marketing and they didn't really know how to price their product, and it was a brand new factory. But we were over there for I think 3 months, and we left in maybe April. We were over there during the wintertime. Left in April, and I think somebody told me by June or July they'd sold out most of their inventory. They hadn't sold out most while I was there, but shortly thereafter they did.
what was the next country that you helped after Jordan?
Well, the country director in Jordan, who recently died, by the way, he and his wife took to us, and headquarters IESC had asked them if they knew anyone who would be a good country director for Egypt.
Jordan.
Correct me, Jack.
No, that really wasn't it. The country director in Jordan wanted to leave, and he recommended us to take over the country directorship in Jordan.
Why didn't we? I don't know.
Well, so we were back in the States by that time, and they asked us, were we interested? We said yes. They said, all right, you've got to come to Stanford for training for
Oh, that's
a month or so. And so we went to train with the idea that we were going to go to Jordan.
I forgot.
And met there another guy who was in training who was going to Maoli, who was Peter Cross. And then the two of us kind of went together as friends. And while we were in Stanford, the country director in Egypt said that he wanted to move to Kenya and be the country director in Kenya. Well, Egypt was by far the largest operation that IESC had. They probably had 40% of all the projects that IESC did around the world were done in Egypt, primarily because the American government through USAID funded some of the projects that were done in Egypt. So they needed somebody quickly in Egypt, and they asked if both Peter and ourselves would go to Egypt. And we said yes, we would, to take that over instead of Jordan, because it was much more important. Then it became between Peter and I as to who was going to be the head person or how we were going to work it, and we kind of worked it out ourselves. Peter really didn't want to be the head, so I said, well, why don't we split the country up, and you go to Alexandria, we'll go to Cairo, and I'll be the country director. But as far as I'm concerned, you can do whatever you want to do in Alexandria. You have to report through me, but I'm not going to tell you what to do or anything. And he was happy with that. So that's what we did. So the two couples went to Egypt just about the same time, and we did that.
And what was your setup in Egypt like, your living arrangements, etc.?
Well, we were in the Ramses Hilton Now the Nile Hilton has been there for many, many years, but the Ramses Hilton was fairly new. And we were on, what, the
36.
36th floor. We had a suite. We had 2 bedrooms and 2 baths and a small kitchen and large dining and living area.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that we got such luxurious quarters was because we had volunteers arriving every month and leaving, and we would have farewell parties and greeting parties as they came and went, and we needed the room.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very nice. We overlooked the Nile, and it couldn't have been nicer, could it? The apartment.
And the arrangement for where we lived were really made by Lauren, forgotten what his name is,
Oh,
who was a predecessor, who was a real
he didn't
tightwad,
have our apartment though.
tightwad kind of wheeler dealer, and he'd made an arrangement with the hotel where all of the men who came over, the volunteers who came over, would be at 40% of the rack rate, would be their price, plus they would give us this suite free.
Mm-hmm.
So the deal had already made before we got in there, and they had just recently made the deal, so they didn't live in our suite for long, but they did, and if you recall, she kept her clothes in the apartment for a while.
What were your impressions when you first went to see the Great Pyramids? What are they like, the Great Pyramids, for those people who haven't been and may never get to see the Great Pyramids?
Well, they're quite certainly awe-inspiring, and
Did you go inside of them?
we went inside of one of them, and of course they're the main tourist attraction for anybody going through Cairo. That and the Sphinx, which was right near the pyramids, and
Didn't you get to ride on a camel when you were there?
I'm sure I must have. I know you did.
I
You
remember
never
seeing it-
rode on a camel?
No, never got to, but that's all right. I remember a shot where you were next to some camels, and I thought you had an option.
Well, I know when Teasley and James were there, they
Okay.
rode on camels, right?
And wasn't there a bazaar next to it, a camel?
No, that was the Kanakalili Bazaar, which was a little bit out of town. And what my job was, and then Dad can tell his, I was in charge of all the volunteer wives who came with their men for these jobs. And I tried to get them interested in various volunteer things, but most of them were just there to see Cairo. So I would arrange tours to different places and go with them. And if they were sick, I would practically nurse them. And it was fun, but it was a job.
Yeah, it must have been hard to get the information to pass on to the folks. Or
No,
was it?
not really.
No problems with language?
We had a wonderful tourist office in the hotel that I dealt through and could get buses to take them places. And after you've done it over and over again, you really know the spots you're taking them to.
What was one of the best trips that you took within the country? You went down the Nile, I know, a couple of times. Where did you go going down the Nile, Dad?
Well, first of all, you asked about the pyramids. I think the pyramids are not hardly worth even going out to
Good.
see.
Yeah.
But of course, it's in all the books. And the Sphinx would be interesting to see, except that it's very deteriorated, and it doesn't. And even in the past 10 years, it's gone bad. when you said going inside the pyramid, there isn't anything inside the pyramid. You go through a long tunnel, crouch down. You have to almost crawl to go in. And when you get in there, there's a room that's about the size of, maybe it's 40 by 40. Nothing's there. There's a big stone esophagus. It's empty, so there isn't anything at all to see in it. The pyramids at Saqqara, which are to the south, that's up the Nile, are much more interesting. They're step pyramids. They're older than the other, and there's one big one and a couple of small ones. And under there, when you go inside there, it's more interesting because they're chambers that you could go in, and they used to bury bulls down in these things. So that area is much more interesting.
But we could see those from our window, remember?
Yes. At the pyramid, the Giza pyramids, the most interesting thing to see, which people oftentimes don't, is the boat that is encased in glass now, and it was dug up and is practically in pristine condition from where it was buried, and that is extremely interesting to see. But the pyramids themselves are, other than how they do it, it's not that interesting.
What was the other sites that you saw that were interesting? Abu Simbel, is that?
Well, those are the tourist sites, and they are interesting, and Abu Simbel and I forgot the name.
Karnak? No.
Karnak, yeah, Karnak. And everybody should see these, but probably the most interesting trips that we took were with our driver alone, and we would maybe go to a what do you call water in the desert?
Oasis.
An oasis, which isn't as we think of it, but it's really a small town, usually a lake. Or we would go down on the desert road to Alexandria, or more particularly, the things that we remember was going to the Sinai and St. Catherine, and what's the name of the place? I'll think of it. And when we went there was really absolutely nothing. You either had to stay. Well, we stayed at a little half motel at a defunct airport one time, and the other time we stayed in kind of a beach motel sort of thing. And now it's on. This was on the Red Sea, and you could go diving. And now that area is like a Disneyland theme park.
How about when
After Egypt, your next station was in Costa Rica, was it not, Dad?
It's in Costa Rica, and this was a man who had a small company that was importing technical surgical instruments, electronic instruments, and that kind of thing, and selling in Costa Rica. And he was doing a fairly good job of it, and he wanted somebody to come down. And as in most of these projects, you never really knew what they wanted done, so I went down, and I figured he wanted sales help. And so the two of us went to Costa Rica, and we lived in a hotel there?
they must have? I don't remember.
I don't really recall where we were. But the job, as it turned out, is I didn't think I was doing what he wanted. I told him, I said, you're kind of wasting your time because I can't help you in sales. You're doing very well. He was increasing sales 40% a year. And so he finally came out and said, well, that isn't what I brought you down here for. The idea was that I am doing well in sales, and but you worked for an American Hospital Supply who did the same thing, did very well, and I wanted your experience on what's going to happen to my business. Well, that changed things completely, and I said, well, the rate you're going now with the pay scale that you have, which was a commission scale, the salesmen are going to own your business. So that then crystallized what the project was, and I think we did some traveling there. Costa Rica is a fairly small country. The best trip, I think, was the plane trip down to Panama, or to the coast down to the border of Panama.
We also went and visited a rainforest, and we rented a 4-wheel drive truck type thing to get there.
Hmm.
And it was fascinating. Took a tour of different parts of it and saw many birds that you never see anywhere else, and other flora and fauna.
Was it uncomfortably humid and hot, or
Not uncomfortably, no.
were there beautiful beaches along with the lush
Yes,
rainforest?
we saw some other parts of Costa Rica that were very lovely, and along the coast. And as Dad said, when we flew to, where was that we flew?
Well, it was down on the coast. It was in Costa Rica, but it was very close to the border with
And
Panama.
we landed on the beach, remember?
The plane landed on the beach, and it was in kind of like tiki huts. It wasn't.
I remember our particular hut had an outside shower that was protected by walls, and
Any language difficulties in Costa Rica?
no,
Most people spoke English, or you had an interpreter?
what in your business, Jack?
Well, English is the common language
Yeah.
in Costa Rica, much more so than Spanish.
How about the food? Was the food good? Was it, you have to worry about cleanliness or water or anything like that?
No, we never did. We well, I was going back to Egypt again.
Yeah. I know
Costa Rica is basically, frankly, it's kind of an American country. So many American retirees are down there that it's the most Americanized country of any in South America, by far.
We were just there, what, 3 months?
Yeah, I don't even know that we're there that much. 2 to 3 months at the most.
Then after Costa Rica, your next
Romania.
Romania.
And we went to Romania because they had a hospital that had been built by the Russians that was deteriorating, and they wanted to have somebody who would inventory what they had and make listings of what they should have to bring it up to date, because Romania had just recently passed from underneath the communist regime, and they were trying to be democratic. As it really turned out, the project was they wanted to figure out some way where I could get donations for all this equipment. The listing and all was needed, but that wasn't their real motive. But they didn't write that down on their project request.
And about what year again? What is this?
Oh, I
I don't know.
Maybe.
Teasley has a diary of the whole Romanian trip that she called the Eye of the Needle, and it's been
were
printed
in
up. And it's here.
that's where we were in Split.
And we
And
lived.
we
We
had
lived
that-
in Split. And we lived in Split.
That
That's where the project-
delightful couple that you worked with,
Yeah, he was a
and
doctor.
his wife,
He was a doctor.
who was very nice to us. And
Were you helping children or
I
anyone
I
there?
didn't there, no.
What were you doing when he was in the office or working? Were you looking at the city or touring at all, or watching soap operas at home?
No, never watched soap opera. I frankly have forgotten a lot about Romania. I get it mixed up
Yeah.
with other places
Right.
like Poland.
How about Poland? What was Poland like, Mother?
Well, Poland I remember more about, really. We were given an apartment above a garage.
Excuse me. That's Romania. In Poland,
Yes.
we
Well,
Poland.
I said I was mixed up, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then I remember more about
What was the apartment like above the garage in
Very
Romania?
nice. It had 2 rooms and a bath, and the woman who lived in the house was most helpful and nice to me.
But it was a contrast to your Hilton digs in Cairo. I'm impressed that you're so
Oh.
flexible to be able to live
Of
anywhere
course.
in any conditions. That's wonderful.
Remind me some more about Romania then, because I loved it.
Well, you like it because the town Split is a very not medieval, but it's
Yes.
a town with picturesque
I remember
houses
I
and
would
architecture.
walk to
And
town
you walked. We didn't have a
from
car.
our
though.
apartment.
We didn't have a car. We did rent a car, and one weekend we rented a car and toured all over northern Romania, which is a beautiful country, mountainous, not mountainous, hilly mostly, and of course Dracula. That's Dracula country. This is the Transvaal mountain range, and you got
We went
Moldavia, which
to,
is
we went
part
to
of Russia.
Braun Castle
Brahms Castle supposedly had something to do
with
with
Dracula.
Dracula, but in actuality, they all said it didn't.
That's funny.
What time of year were you there?
It was cold. It was probably we probably went over there. I don't know, but probably went over there February or March.
Jeez.
But this delightful man that you worked with.
Yeah, and we were living in their garage apartment that they had set up for their daughter. It was very nice, and language was a problem there.
Ah.
There were not very many people that spoke English anyplace.
They
he did.
had young children, I remember, and I often thought later we should have had the boy over to the States.
Yeah.
You know, sometime. He was,
And how much time did you have from after Romania to Poland? Did you come back? And it seems
Oh,
like
yeah.
all of these events were pretty
close together.
close together.
Well, they were all in different years.
Right.
The Polish thing was a little different in that Poland had just come out from underneath the communist yoke, and they had a list of 200 companies that had just become private or were about to become private, and they had gone to IESC to say, would you send somebody over here to look at these companies and see if you could send an executive over here, retired executive, who might help them in this transition. So
How about our interpreter?
So ISC set up 3 teams of people who had experience with ISC, of which we were one, and we split the country up. And Teasley and I were to take the portion that lies to the northwest, in other words, next to Germany, and it's the German part of Poland. And with them, since nobody spoke English in these areas, and that was going to be a problem, they got an American Polish but American descent couple to go with us, and his role was to be interpreter. I was to evaluate the company and see whether I thought it was worthwhile to send a man over there. And we also had you had to make sure that there were quarters for these people, and that was difficult. You might have a project that'd be all right, but there really wasn't any place for them to live.
But he came with his wife, and they stayed in the same hotel. The what was the name of the
Poznan?
Warsaw. What was the name of the hotel?
Warsaw is the name of Warsaw. Poznan was the city we were in. I don't know the name of it.
Anyway, the couple were there, and we finally. He was a help to Jack. They had a car, and they went out to different cities. But she mostly visited relatives. I mean, they got this free trip over to Poland,
Oh, yeah.
and they were gone quite a bit of the time visiting relatives. Near our hotel was a main square of the town, and it was very interesting. They had a clock that had figures came out when it struck the hour, and they had several museums, and they had good restaurants, and I spent quite a bit of time around that Rijeka, what the square's called?
Might have been.
Right,
Paul.
it started with R.
It was something like that. Yeah.
Was there a change were people excited that they were coming out from communism and that all the national industries were privatized, did you get a feeling that people were happy with the change of events, or not?
Well, they were pleased with it. I don't know that they're happy. I mean,
They're still
you're
depressed.
talking politics again, and what, like the American newspapers may say. But the problem is living and eating, and that's your main desires. And if democracy will let you live better, fine. If not, we don't want it.
We didn't hear English spoken.
No.
In
no.
fact, in the hotel, I remember once we were up on sort of a mezzanine and heard English being spoken, and there was some tour that had
Yeah,
just come in
yeah.
downstairs. And we ate all our meals in the restaurant, and I remember we'd get number 2 breakfast or number 1 is the way we chose them.
Yeah,
That was your last station with IESC, was it not?
that's the last thing.
And so are you on call still, or is that it?
I think we're a little old.
Technically you are, but IESC has had problems, and they've called lots of times to have me write reports or get my advice on something, but there's not much fun in that. So you try to duck out of that.
Charlie.
While we were in Poznan, we had a weekend, so the wall had come down in Berlin perhaps 2-3 weeks before, and we got in the car and drove from Poznan to East Germany and across the border, the Polish-East German border, which up till 3 weeks ago you couldn't even get across. And I remember going long lines of cars going both directions. But coming up and getting ready for my passport, and they saw it was an American passport, they didn't even look at it, they just waved us on through. So we went in through East Berlin, we entered through East Berlin, and went and stayed in I guess in a hotel, I don't remember
Yes.
very much, in West Berlin. So you had an opportunity to see East Berlin before they cleaned it up. I'm sure now they've cleaned it up and it doesn't look anything like it did before.
It was very interesting.
The history on the boats are basically two boats. Both of them named Watermark. One was a 36-foot Krogan Manatee, and the second one was a 26-foot Nordic Tug. The Manatee on the first circle trip we took from Sarasota, Florida, across Okeechobee, up the east coast, into the Hudson River, halfway across the New York Barge Canal, which was the old, at Troy, which is the old Erie Canal, up to Canada, across Lake Ontario to Canada, and on a series of rivers and portages that had been cut by the Canadian government, including about 6 locks, following generally the old canoe portage
What was
routes.
the name of it?
The Trent Severn Canal is what the name of it, and it dumped out, or it ended at Severn, which is on Lake Huron, Severn, Trent, Severn, yes, enters at Trent and out at Severn, and then up the east coast of Lake Huron, past Perry Sound, where my sister had an island, up to Mackinac, the Straits, or up to Little Current, and the North Channel, in that area. At that time we had to stay in the Little Current area for 4 or 5 days because we had a broken fuel pump. The shaft had broken. It wasn't just something. So we had to fly a fuel pump from Fort Lauderdale on back up there, down to Mackinac and down the coast of Michigan to White Lake.
And how long did that take?
And that took about
60
some odd days, but there was about 2 weeks taken out of that, not including the 6, because when we got to Troy, the water was not. Anyway, the locks were closed on the barge canal, and we went back to Florida for 2 weeks, and then came back and picked the boat up and continued on.
I'd forgotten that.
Yeah.
And who joined you along the way?
Well, on that trip, the only one I remember, well, two people joined. Libby Lindsay joined us at
New York.
New York, and down at the Battery in that
At
harbor,
the foot of the
which is
Huh.
right at the
Towers.
foot of the towers.
Wow.
And the
World
towers,
Trade Center.
had they had the explosion in the tower
yes,
before?
they had
They'd had the
remember they
explosion.
had
They had
one
the first explosion.
They
Right.
had the explosion, but obviously the towers were
in
there.
the basement or in the first floor.
we
And-
went up the top of one of them for dinner,
Yeah.
and we could look down on the harbor, little harbor there, and ours was the smallest boat anywhere around. It was a cute story about the electricity.
So we, you want me to tell that, the electricity thing? So we put the boat up for the winter in White Lake, in Whitehall Landings. And they kept that there. So the next spring we came back, and in September we started out and went down the coast of Michigan to Michigan City, and then across to Chicago. And in Chicago we put the boat, we were anchored or moored right across from the Chicago Stadium, and had some friends from Evanston who came down, and we had a picnic. Teasley called one of the catering places downtown Chicago, and they had picnic bags
Delivered.
delivered, and we had that on the boat. And then we took the boat out a little bit out in the harbor, but as I remember, the weather was deteriorating badly, so I didn't go out too far. Came back, but some of them had never been on a boat, had never been out in Lake Michigan at that time. We continued on. Well, we picked up Bobby Sanderson at that point, didn't we? And she continued as far as Ottawa.
Did she get off the boat at Ottawa?
Someplace she got off.
I know
beyond
she
Ottawa.
did, but I didn't know that was
Well, that's
it.
where she lived.
I know.
And then we continued on down through you go down the Illinois to the Mississippi, and up the Ohio into through either one of the dams,
Tom Bigby.
and into the Kentucky Lake District, and then down the Tom Bigby, down to the Black Warrior and the Alabama River, and you come out at Mobile. And then then you're in the Inland Waterway, and we ran in, I've forgotten the name of the town, but it would have been east of Pensacola. We looked down, and the bilge is full of water, and we're leaking.
We were
And
we were
in-
going along.
and we were going along, and I told Teasley to run it over at least into shallow water if we sank. And I finally figured out that it was coming in through the shaft, through the, what do they call it? King's, I've forgotten what they call it.
Hatching?
Shaft. No, it's King something. And I called the Coast Guard just to alert them what our problem was, and said we didn't need help. But we got back to, it was a Sunday, and we got back to a marina, got in there, and the next day they pulled it out. And what had happened is that one boat was had taken the engine mounting to the boat, had come, one bolt was completely sheared, the second bolt was very loose, so that the engine was shaking the shaft so much it had opened up the bearing, that Kingston bearing that is in the back. So we were there for probably 10 days while they had to take the engine out, put a new shaft in, same propeller, but it was a major job. And then continued on back to Florida.
How long was that leg back?
I think that was
Day-wise.
probably about 60 days too.
Up the same.
Did you ever total up the
No.
total miles?
Yeah, someplace along the line I have it, but I don't know what the miles are. But
What an incredible journey, especially for two people at your age.
Well,
And all
this
the
boat
challenges.
was very comfortable. You know, this was the Krogan, and our stateroom was forward, and we had a queen size bed and closets and a big galley and a living room and a back screen porch. It was a comfortable boat.
Yeah.
And it was run from up on top deck. Did you see that one?
Sure.
Oh, sure.
The second trip was done. We sold that boat and bought a Nordic tug, which was much smaller, more modern, not as much maintenance involved in it. But this we sent on a trailer. I didn't trail it up, but somebody else trailed it to White Lake. And so it was up here, and we used it on White Lake that summer. And the following, a little later, I think, in the year, but September, October, we took that boat back down the same general trip that we had done before, back to Florida. And we didn't have any problems. The boat was easier to handle. The living quarters were cramped, so that it kind of strained the marriage every now and then. But as far as the boat itself was concerned and handling it, as far as I was concerned, it was much easier to handle in the locks and everything else.
I might add that in both boats we took watches. I handled the steering 1 hour, or no, we did it 2 hour watches, so that we each had a share of running the boat, which made it a lot more interesting. I mean, Jack would even go take a nap when I was at the helm. And it was fun for me.
And so, with that coming at an end, you asked for some kind of philosophical comments on it, or then you can ask me those things. But as I sit through this discussion here, or this comment, if you'll kind of go back and look at it, most all of this life has been we. Very seldom am I talking about what I've done, or Teasley talks about what she has done, but most of it is what we have done. And the vacations have always been we vacations, and so that the life as I see it has been, and I'm not being maudlin about it, but has been a kind of a joint venture along the line. Not that we don't have fights and discussions and all that kind of things. We haven't had many slamming doors, but but you know, we have the other stuff that people come in. And as far as raising children, I think the primary motivation has been to make them independent and independent of us.
Absolutely.
And I think we have been successful with that. In doing that, you get some downsides in that you don't have the family unity that a lot of families have. Everybody getting better at Christmas and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have that necessarily, but and you don't necessarily have the family closeness in it. But to me, if the people are individual and can learn to live their own life and can run their own affairs and run them, and I think the three children have done that. Not that they haven't had their problems too, but there's a plus side to that, and there is a downside, but that's the way with all other kinds of life.
Well, I'll just interject that you think we're not close, but we're independent, but I think we are still very close.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I don't know, but the family. I mean, lots of families get together for reunions and all of that, and we don't do a whole lot of that. And I'm not very sentimental about that. Maybe some others are, but I'm not.
No, I think I speak for all of your other children that you've done a fabulous job, and it's been
Well,
teaching by example often rather than teaching directly.
One important thing is to keep a sense of humor.
Yes.
You know.
And did you have any? I know we've
Well, the one
kind of
specific
foregone
is
a lot of the specific questions, but it's kind of hard to use a format
sure.
unless you just have a straight question. And
Well,
answer
just
thing.
one that I think everyone was asking about, advice here on out for not only us, but if you want to take on society in general, you can. And this is not only for us, as your immediate children, but also your grandchildren, great grandchildren, and on and on. And maybe a quick comment on society and any suggestions or comments you
Go
have
on,
on
you're the
society.
No, you go ahead.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think we have been most fortunate in children and grandchildren. And I think discipline is important, and follow through with different disciplinarian things you teach your children. And I again say keep a sense of humor and keep in touch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, can't think of anything else.
That's fine.
Well, on the political end, I differ with Teasley a little bit on this. I don't think things are any different now than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever. And the problems are different, but it's just as critical and it's just as dangerous and it's just as everything else now as it was any other time. You know, if you want to talk about depression, there are people worried about even getting something to eat or to wash their clothes or anything. People don't worry about that so much anymore. But now they're worried about biological warfare or something. So there's always going to be something. I don't think things are in any worse shape today. Matter of fact, there aren't any significant wars going on around this world today, and that's interesting in itself. As far as handling it individually, I think you have to think of what you do as an individual or as a family group and stop worrying about what the country does and what everybody else does, because really, when it comes down to it, you don't have a whole lot of influence on it. You can sit around and argue about it, but you don't have a lot of influence.
So what are you going to do
Just
from now on?
You live your life.
Same thing. Won't we?
Yeah?
Continue.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you just continue. What you do is you change your lifestyle according to what you can do.
Physically.
What you can do financially, which is different. What you can do mind-wise, what you can do physically, and not worry that you haven't got some other things, but just, use what you got for the best of your can.
Mm-hmm.
Go that way.
And we're looking forward to every future year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As they say, cut.